Calling to order the South Maui Community Plan Advisory Committee on March 22nd at 5:30 p.m. Can we have a roll call? Still good. Okay. Evelina mai na lalo I ke komike o lalo o kaya ulo no kapapa ho o lalo no Maui hama. Evelina mai no ho I ka po e o ke ana ho o lalo o ki kalana o Maui. Me ka leha o Maui me. I kuka ana kako I ke iahi ahi ina I kamahana no ke alakau o ka papahana hope loa no ia. Una I kama kulekele hana no o ka papa ho o lalo. So I learned that we have no live streaming today either on Akaku, but we do on Facebook Live. And no ability to testify remotely, but there will be an opportunity likely on April 26th when we discuss land use in the North Kihei sub-area. We worked a little bit on the schedule for the remaining things to do, and if we may finish the transportation actions today. If not, we should finish them next week. And once we've done that, then we're done with the first pass through all the policies and actions. So the next thing we want to do after that is review them. The adopted policies and actions and prioritize the actions. And also look at the things that we referred to the planning department for guidance, and so we can finish those as well. And after that, we'll start on section 3 of the plan, which is land use, or commonly called MAPS. So I think, Mike, you have a report for us.
Yes, well, I'm right next to the speaker. What a shock. I'll try not to make this a weekly event, but we did have a KCA general membership meeting last evening. And my count, we had 5 of the Cpac members in attendance. So legal tells us we have 3 or more. So it was, you were there, right? Yep. And I know Vernon was there, and our deputy, and also vice chair, and our chair, myself. And Kyoki was there too? Oh, guilty, yes, thank you. I'm going to be deaf in my left ear. So it was a community meeting, so we didn't discuss things with each other. For those of you who weren't aware, and you should have been there because we had the mayor and we had our council member, and but it was a presentations by people, and us were there as attendants, so we weren't there for CPAC matters, and I think that sums it up unless any of the other attendees wanted to comment on it.
Any questions for Mike about the public meeting yesterday? Okay. Okay, so at this time, I will open up for public testimony. Oh, okay, there was a Zoom meeting last Thursday.
Last Thursday, there was an additional meeting which brought Mike, myself, Rob, Coco, and Vernon together, and that was reviewing the ecological alternatives assessment feasibility study for that's affiliated with the drainage plan. Again, no business of the CPAC was discussed at the meeting, but of course, drainage is a topic that we love to talk about here. And it also included some discussion about potential wetland concepts for the Waipuilani area. Anyone else have anything to add?
Thank you. Okay, so our topic today is transportation. So I'm opening up to public testimony, 3 minutes per person on the topic of transportation. So you can approach the microphone and say your name, please.
Hi, Doug Ballard, South Maui resident. And I'd like to submit comments on two pieces of testimony that was submitted, one from Maui tomorrow and one from Dick Mayer. Dick Mayer, as you might know, used to serve on the planning commission when Wailea was approved. And he noted that A and B had promised to establish an internal transit system within Wailea. And of course, that never got done. And so he's proposing a policy and 2 action items. Policy is to create internal transit systems within the 3 large properties, Wailea, McKenna, and Honolulu, in the southern part of Maui Community Plan. Action 1, in order to relieve multiple parking issues along the coastal areas and to facilitate the movement of workers and residents, A, Wailea Resort is required to establish an internal transit system for residents and tourists. It should be funded by Wailea Homeowners Association or the Wailea Community Association as appropriate. And B, when McKenna Resort begins building residential and tourist facilities, Mahuka of the McKenna and Louis Road, it should also provide an internal transportation system funded by property owners. And when Wailea 670 is completed, 300 units, it must also establish an internal transit system. And these would be privately financed, not publicly financed. And 2, a long-range future action requiring these 3 large properties to integrate the separate systems into a comprehensive transit system for the southern portion of South Maui. And I thought that was really some solid recommendations. And then in terms of Maui tomorrow, on action item 1.05, they're already, in the South Maui Regional Parks and Open Space Management Plan, there already are greenway corridors identified. And so what we're suggesting is adding the language, update the greenway section contained within the South Maui Regional Parks and Open Space Management Plan, rather than reinvent it perhaps with a new study. And create an implementation timeline for South Maui Greenway multi-path system. We're also, and it goes on with the language that is contained in your draft plan. We also suggest raising this in priority so that it can happen perhaps on the heels of or close to the completion of the collector. That's so important to South Maui. Let's see. Suggesting that we list the MPO as a lead county agency, county lead agency. On action item 1.08, we're basically recommending combining 1.08 and 1.09 into one action item, which suggested language is implement the transportation demand management strategies of the MPO. For example, providing incentives to partner with South Maui employers. Well, my time's up. But you can obviously read what's been submitted, and we encourage you to strongly consider. Thank you.
Thank you. You have any questions for the testifier? Yep. Vernon?
How's it, Doug? So, so like in the Wailea area, where do you think this road could possibly be in this southern part of the South Maui Community Plan? In the Wailea area, right?
Yeah, correct.
So you kind of get an idea where or what the guy's name?
I don't
Dick
know
Mayer.
what the routes you mean?
Yeah.
No, I don't know what the routes
Okay.
would be. That would, I guess, need to be established. But it's just something they had committed to do.
Right.
But never did.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Chair, Doug over here, right here in the corner.
Okay. Kilke and then Mike and then
Okay,
Wayne.
sorry. Sorry, Mike, did I cut you off? Okay. So thank you for coming to testify. When I had received this testimony, I was reading it, I read it, and I'm sorry, I couldn't help but thinking, like, how is the county, I mean, if this is like privately funded, how is the county involved in this? Like, to what extent?
Well, that's an excellent question,
Okay.
and I don't know if I have the absolute answer for it, except that it was a representation made by A and B in their obtaining of approvals for Wailea. And I would hope and think that that might be enforceable. If they, in other words, if they indicated, and if it was made as a condition of approval, that I don't know, if it was made a condition of approval, then it should be enforceable,
Okay,
I would think.
yeah. That helped,
But
but
they
it's still a little foggy because
I know.
we're, to create a policy or an action referring to this, it's kind of like, I'm trying to see where the involvement of the county would be.
Well, that might be something the county could
Yeah.
research, certainly. Dick, of course, has firsthand, he was there during the approvals. And if, I was a planner, planning director in the previous life, and if someone made a representation that they would do something, then they would have to do it. Because they're convincing us to approve their project. And they're doing that by making certain representations. And one of those representations is that they will create a transit system, then that should be enforceable.
Thank you.
We have Mike and then Wayne.
Okay, we're going to have your head spinning side to side. This is on 1.05. That first, it says update the greenways section contained within the South Maui region parks and open space master plan. I believe that plan was created in like 2002 or 2003. Chris Hart and Partners did it for the county and it was approved, but it became one of those plans that sat on the shelf, and we would bring it up on occasion and say, why aren't we doing something about this? And then maybe 4 years ago, the prior landowner for the Karanihakoi Gulch, he was trying to do something. He realized he couldn't develop it, so he was trying to get the county involved in that to say, well, why can't, county take this and make it a greenway? But again, nothing happened with it. So I think this is a very positive action to 21 years later now, let's try and do something with it. So I think that's a very positive action.
And that's what, because it's a little dated, that's why we said update it. But there's no need to reinvent the wheel if we already have the good stuff, which apparently it is, on the shelf, take it off the shelf.
Exactly. Thank you.
And then Wayne, and then Daniel.
Mr. Chairman, this should be a project for the planning department to look at. If Wailea was granted in April of '73, I'm sure there's some conditions from the minutes that you could find out what they committed to and get this back to the committee. Thank you.
Daniel?
Aloha, Doug. Nice seeing you back again. Recovering planners are always welcome at the Cpac. So with regards to the creating internal transit system for 3 property owners, Wailea, Makena, and Honuaula, and it'll be interesting to find out if this was an actual condition or just something they said they would do but didn't do. But the policy would also extend to Honuaula, which it's not a condition of their rezoning, or McKenna. But be that as it may, depending how it's worded, it would be nice if that could be done within these. Wailea is a master plan project, right?
Yes.
master plan project, and I believe McKenna is pretty much the same. That if this is something that wasn't required, but if they're encouraged to do it or willing to do it, I think it's a great idea to relieve the impacts. So I guess my question, I guess I don't really have a question. I guess my question was it required for McKenna, or was it something they promised to do but didn't do? And if so facto, can this also be applied to the other large owners? And what are your comments on that?
Well, yeah, I don't know if the original Wailea approval included the land which is now called Wailea 670. It did not, okay. I don't know the answer to that. That's something maybe the county can weigh in on. And as to the status of the McKenna approval, has that been finally approved? I honestly don't know. And if it hasn't been approved, then there's still opportunity to add that. But the objective, of course, would be to relieve traffic and parking, to be able to shuttle people to beaches and other things, and establish that regular transit system. So it seems to be a good idea.
Any other clarifying questions for Doug? Thank you. Next testifier.
Good evening, Cpac members. I'm Rory Frampton. I'm a planning consultant, and I do work for the ranches that own the lands south of the highway. I wanted to speak tonight on the transportation planning action 1.13, which says identify a new multimodal transportation corridor through South Maui to Central Maui, Mauka, or above Pi'ilani Highway. Some people call this the Mauka bypass. And the idea has been floated for a while. There's language in the Kihei Community Plan. There's reference in the Maui Island Plan. And these concepts talk about a bypass above the developed areas, kind of a free-flowing road all the way to Mokulele Highway. And at first glance, that seems like a great idea, right? A road that we could all just take on and zip to Central Maui. However, the reality of such a project is very questionable, mainly due to cost. And also that state and federal agencies aren't funding those types of projects anymore, these bypass projects that go around communities. A more realistic option has surfaced, which would call for enhanced north-south connectivity within future communities to be developed above the highway. This would allow coordination with long-term development of Mauka lands and would facilitate phasing and funding of portions of the roadway by adjacent landowners. The concept of a transportation corridor within future growth areas is supported by nationally renowned transportation planners who emphasize the importance of transportation, connectivity, and circulation within development areas as opposed to around them or separate from communities. The state DOT's recently adopted South Maui Transportation Plan recommends what I think is a more realistic version of a, quote, bypass project. I would actually call it more of like a Mauka north-south collector or connector. And I've attached the handouts to the testimony I passed out. Sorry it was late. But there's, on the last 2 pages, these are excerpts from the South Maui Transportation Plan. The first step, and on that, well, in that conceptual corridor, it's the yellow line on the last page that runs within the urban growth boundary, the Maui Island Plan's urban growth boundary. And it goes through portions of the MRTP and also portions of Kihei Mauka urban growth boundary. The first step to making this a reality would be to get government agencies, community, and landowners to agree upon a route. We don't want to see what happened with the Makai north-south collector road, where the state was moving full speed ahead on a 4-lane roadway and the community stopped it and the state dropped the funding and stopped moving forward. I mean, we would have had that roadway if people had agreed upon the design early on. They didn't, the community fought it, and so here we are still waiting for it to get built. So I recommend just prioritizing that action. And I don't know if this language works, but on the second page, I say prioritize identification of a new multimodal transportation corridor, et cetera, as recommended by the South Maui Transportation Plan. And I also recommend moving this item to the CIP portion of the list. And also, we could include the chair's recommended language about maybe inserting the words design and implementation, since this is a 20-year plan. Yeah.
Thank you. Clarifying questions? Wayne?
Roy, what landowners do you represent tonight?
Haleakala Ranch and Ko'onaulu Ranch. This is just more of my general testimony as a planner, but I do represent those, and they own lands within the Kihei Mauka growth area. I wanted to make sure to disclose that.
Do you have plans on urbanizing the area, Mauka?
Yes, it's as identified in the Maui Island Plan and the urban growth boundary. And it's in an area called Kihei Mauka. And so, yes, it's been contemplated. The ranch owners themselves would not be the developers, but they want to assist with the coordination and planning, and so there's actual planning going on over this broad area rather than independent development projects.
You as landowners would definitely benefit by getting the urban designation. And how do you propose to fund it? Would the landowners participate in funding?
In funding the roadway?
Yes.
Yeah, if it's included within the areas that are going to be developed, yes.
You're
Those-
probably going to bring in a lot of traffic once you urbanize it.
Yes. So through proper planning and identification of additional corridors and connectivity, the idea is to, and maybe get more transportation above the highway between, say, Ohukai and the high school. You relieve some of the pressure off of Pi'ilani Highway. The Makai North-South Collector Road should alleviate some pressure off Pi'ilani Highway. So I think just overall, you just want more circulation, so not everybody has to go on the same road.
Thank you.
So this does not, I mean, the drawing does not look that different from things I've seen in the past from Mocha Bypass. It's a fairly straight line. Looks like it could be a fairly fast road. I was talking to Ryan Churchill the other day, and their concept is that Ninau Road, going through the Maui Research and Technology Park, would be part of this.
Yes.
And that would be a much slower road. That's more like, it's a winding road, not that wide. So, I mean, this looks like something kind of in between the original bypass thinking and then what MRTP is thinking.
Yeah, I think that's why we really need to get agreement on the route. The second page kind of shows a little different than the first page, or I should say the third page of my handout, but the first page of the DOT report and the second page shows it a little bit differently. But yeah, this idea of enhanced connectivity within urban areas is really kind of the progressive thinking when it comes to transportation planning. So even though it might be a little slower and you can't be going 55 or 65, the idea is if you can move along consistently and get through the areas, then it's going to enhance for everybody. It'll alleviate pressure off the highway and just help with overall connectivity.
But it still connects to Veterans Highway rather than connecting to Pi'ilani Highway. I mean, it connects, yeah. Right.
It connects right at the intersection where, I think that's right where Veterans turns into Pi'ilani, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other clarifying questions? Daniel?
Rob, your questions kind of answered some of my questions. So I'm looking at the last page. We're going from north to south. Your conceptual line begins at Kanani,
Yes.
where the current district police station is. And it looks like it runs through the R&T Park, Haleakala, and Ko'onaulu Ranch in Monsanto land. At the very end where it meets the interchange of Mokulele, aka Veterans Highway, and Pi'ilani Highway.
That's correct, but I do want to clarify, that's not my line. This is from the state's plan.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's not my proposed line. That's what's in the adopted
Your
South Maui
proposed-
Transportation Plan. And they also clarify that this is just a conceptual route,
Yeah.
but it really needs to be studied and everybody needs to agree on the route. That's the first step. And
Is
that's,
this your white line? Is that?
no, both of those pages
Oh.
with the colored figures are both from the state's South Maui Transportation Plan.
But you see something like that being done, something along those lines?
Yeah, more on the second page with the yellow line.
Yeah, which is the last page.
Yes, the last page. Yeah.
And, so is this something that Ka'onu'ulu, I'm assuming Ka'onu'ulu, Haleakala, yes, what about the R&T part?
Well,
This is,
I can't speak for them. The chair just discussed that they see that potentially going through their project.
I'm just asking if you talked with them about it.
Not recently, but it was discussed as part of their district boundary amendment, I believe.
And the land, looks like the land between the county land at Kanani County land and where it enters into the urban growth boundary, is that ranch land?
A portion of it is ranch. It starts off on actually Monsanto's
It is
southern
Monsanto.
farm
Yeah,
for,
okay.
for the first part.
Right.
There's already an easement through their property,
I
and then
see.
it goes to Haleakala Ranch land. Yeah.
Okay. And then it does hook up to Mokulele.
Eventually,
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But it's a much shorter route to Mokulele than some other concepts that have located it further north.
Further north.
I think the idea is to try to make it as compact and as efficient as possible without, overburdening the agencies to get it built.
I see. Okay. Thank you, Roy.
Thank you.
Any other clarifying questions for Rory? Wayne?
Rory, when I look at the Mauka lands, are you saying that whenever it rains, the flooding occurs in the South Kihei area? Have you guys done a study on the flooding?
Well, the county's done a study. We know the quantities of water that come through there. Any development that happens here is going to have to not contribute to runoff. It's going to have to enhance runoff. So anything that gets developed in this urban growth boundary will not make the drainage problems worse for downstream properties. This is just a small portion of the mountain. Much of that drainage runoff happens from Waimauka. But whatever's in the urban growth boundary, no question, nowadays with the standards nowadays that are imposed, the amount of runoff coming off the property will be less and it will be treated, it'll be better quality water than what's coming off it now.
Are you working with Covenant to try to capture some of the water
We
that comes from the Mauka lands?
We have recently been having discussions with Public Works and with Tom Cook. We've done site visits and we're trying to get moving on. And the ranch has formed a nonprofit. Well, they've assisted in the formation of a nonprofit that's looking at a lot of those activities as well. The foundation is called Malama Haleakala Foundation, and Tova's involved with that. And so, yes, there are steps being taken to work with the government and to identify options to help with this horrendous runoff problem that we have right now. Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Any other clarifying questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next testifier.
Good evening, Chair and members. I'm Zandra Amaral, and my home is contiguous to the ranch. I live on the corner of Ho'okai and Ho'alike. If Haleakala is going to develop or even subdivide, they need to put in roads. Okay, but I was just answering that. My testimony is, and I'll read it because I don't want to get emotional. Okay, improve street network connectivity. Street network connectivity helps reduce the volume of traffic and traffic delays on major streets, arterial and major collectors, and ultimately improves livability in our communities. There is enhanced bicycle pedestrian travel, when the number of street connections or local intersections in communities is increased. A well-connected street network is the traditional grid pattern. Street network collectivity is achieved by providing connections within individual developments, between developments, and by having a well-planned collector road network to complement the arterial highway network. Characteristics of street network collectivity is short block lengths, numerous 3- and 4-way intersections, and minimal dead ends, cul-de-sacs. Go on to the next one. Best practices and actions. 1. Cities and towns may implement street network connectivity for 1. During the street and non-motorized pathway planning and project development. 2. By adopting street connectivity standards while doing their goals. 3. By requiring alleyways and mid-block pedestrian shortcuts. By constructing new roads, pathways, connecting all destinations. Next, by using shorter streets, smaller blocks. Next, by applying traffic calming rather than closing off streets to control excessive vehicular traffic. 2. Establish policies, programs, and statutes. 1. Complete street policy. 2. Mapping connection. 3. Local street connectivity policies. 4. Revisions to development codes and statutes. 5. Connectivity measurements, tools for plan evolution, for growth. I'll go on to the next one. Benefits of improving street network connectivity. Street connectivity redistributes traffic access and entire street network. Connected local streets help keep local trips off of arterial streets and reduces the need for widening and construction improvements on collector or arterial streets. Next, highly connected grids are cheaper to build and maintain, making them more economical. Oh, I went on to my next one. This is 103. Highly connected grids are cheaper to build and maintain, making them more economical by 1, getting better value out of every street, not having to build for higher speed traffic. 3, not creating congestion, choke points. Next, increased connectivity provides for different modes of travel besides automobiles by linking sidewalks, pathways, bicycle lanes, and street destination distances between shorter, thereby potentially increasing trips and motivating people to walk, bicycle when transiting. And finally, a network of streets, sidewalks, bicycle lanes, and paths that connect to each other also reduce the distance children have to travel from home to school. It allows for the use of more local streets rather than major roadways and provide a greater choice of routes to travel to and from school safely and within your respective communities. This is my testimony, guys.
Thank you. Do we have questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Next testifier.
Aloha. Good evening. David Good here, personally and on behalf of Ledcor Maui. I just want to respond to a few things that I've seen printed up. One is talking about specific traffic outcomes like level of service. If the Cpac's inclined to do this, you really should talk to DOT and DPW. Would such outcomes be consistent with the MPO's guidelines? Having a level of service C would mean less congestion, which sounds great, but actually encourages more lanes. We have a lot more lanes out there and more driving. And that makes things like demand management strategies ineffective and hurts transit, walking, and biking. So just be extremely careful with those types of desired outcomes. Regarding the language on major projects south of Kilohana, the 1998 language in the community plan has been satisfied. The actual language in the document says, quote, undertake transportation system improvements concurrently with planned growth of the Kihei-McKenna region require adequate interregional, I emphasize that word, highway capacity, including the widening of Pi'ilani and Mokulele to 4 lanes prior to the construction of major projects south of Kilohana or Mauka Pi'ilani. And since 1998, 4 lanes have been installed for 12 miles from Kahului to Kilohana since the 1998 plan language. So that's basically been satisfied. I think you should focus on defining your top roadway projects. And as I see it, they are, and it's not just me, a lot of people have said this, finish the north-south collector from Ko'ono'ulu to Waipuilani and from Halikuai to Welakahau. And as the chair notes in his graphic, the section from Ohana to Alanui Ke'ili is unbuildable. There's just too many takings that would be required. But there is, however, right away from Alanui Ke'ili north about 900 feet. That would be helpful as an alternate route in those developments. I think Fire Chief testified in favor of getting the north-south collector road. I think everybody understands that. Second big project, do the master planning to establish an alignment for a Mauka relocation of North Kihei Road. And be prepared to build it prior to the existing road becoming inoperable due to sea level rise. 3, do the master planning for a new north-south Mauka Road. Basically what Roy just described. I never talked to Roy about this, but build out the road in phases with an emphasis on starting with connections to Kalaniakoi High School from the Holmes Mauka Pi'ilani Highway. That sounds like a safe way to get to the high school. 4, finish Pi'ilani Highway to 4 lanes from Kilohana to Wailea Iki Drive through phased highway work concurrent with private development based on separate pro rata share agreements, as such agreements may be required between HDOT and Wailea Resort, where there is such an agreement, Honuaula, and McKenna Resort. The language you got on bike and pedestrian facilities, as well as demand management strategies and bus routes are all very good. And then I got a big paragraph on the shuttle service, so I'd be happy to answer any questions about the shuttle service, since you had some earlier. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for David? Randall?
David, thank you. Did have a question.
Use the microphone, please, so everyone can hear.
Did have a question on the shuttle service. How are you going to motivate people to use the shuttle service and get out of their cars?
I'm not sure. So there have been a couple attempts at a shuttle service. There was one right before, well, I think the pandemic shut it down. It's kind of cute, a little open air thing. It's called something Turtle. That's kind of cute, yeah. They did pretty well. It was basically a mom and pop operation, but it hasn't come back. So the demand is close, I think, to something being done privately without someone being forced to do it. If I could speak, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I could talk about the zoning conditions Uncle Wayne was talking about. So the 1970 Kihei Civic Plan, which I think you guys had a copy of, you'll see there's a graphic there of the Wailea area that shows like a central parking area. Like there, the idea was like, oh, everybody's going to park over here, and then somehow they get to their hotels and developments. And it was a concept, right? And so I think that concept lived for a couple of years. The zoning passed on April 19th, 1973. And I've read it. I've read the minutes. I've read everything. The 50th anniversary is coming up soon, in a few weeks. So there's nothing in there that says anything about this being a requirement of zoning. There's requirements for setbacks. There's requirement to have an additional road, the Okolani Road. But there's nothing in there about that being a condition. It was certainly a concept that was contemplated. The 1970 plan also showed the road going, Pi'ilani going all the way to Ulupākua. That's not going to happen. Showed an elementary school in McKenna. That didn't happen. So it's very conceptual, is my point, right? So I think there is an opportunity for shuttle service of some sort down the road. I think it also ought to include the portions of Kihei where there's a lot of resort TVRs. They contribute a lot of traffic on South Kihei Road and to the beaches. And I think the Maui DOT, the bus guys, should do it. If anyone's going to look into it, there's the ones that should do it. It's a public service. It's servicing a public need. But I don't see any way that any of those 3 named resorts have any conditions to do it, and it just wouldn't work as well if It doesn't include all of the TVR folks as well. Thanks for asking.
Other clarifying questions? Daniel?
Hello, David.
Hey, Daniel.
It's good to have you here.
Pun intended.
So I just had a question. Do you think establishing a level of service for some of our corridors, transportation corridors, would be useful?
Well, I'm pretty sure the feds already do it. They're always looking at a certain level of service. Level of service is difficult because you have to look at what does it mean, like there's 168 hours in a week. In my experience, just about everywhere in Maui, is that there's a lot of traffic for a couple hours every day, Monday through Friday, and not so much when school's not in session. And so the level of service in totality over 168 hours is probably pretty good, but it's not so good during the peak hours, right? So I don't know how, you'd have to ask more of an expert on traffic engineering, what level of service means overall. Does it mean because traffic's jammed up for 30 minutes that the road's a failure? No, probably not. So I just don't know how that would be measured.
I think there is a criteria that defines what the different levels of service are, and it has to do with your driving experience. So a level of service of C would mean that, you know, traffic is generally moving and you're getting to where you need to get to in a timely manner. And a level service of F means that you're stuck in traffic, maybe during peak hours or off-peak hours. But there is a standard for each of those levels of service. So in your mind, you think having a goal of a level of service C for our main corridors is not prudent and not reachable? Would have unintended effects to strive to achieve that level of service?
Yeah, I think so much, yes, I think you're gonna have unintended consequences. A level service C, most of those 168 hours a week is probably already achieved, but it's not achieved at peak hour. So in order to get it at peak hour, you've got to have bottlenecks, intersections. You need to have multiple lanes, multiple turn lanes. And someone's gonna have to wait somewhere at an intersection that's not the main corridors. So you can't have, I don't think you can have everywhere level of service C or level of service D. You're always gonna have some side streets. I think like coming out of Maui, right? I have a friend who lives up Maui. Try turn out of there at certain hours, right? It's not easy. It's probably level service F, which means you have to wait, an average of like a minute. But other times during the week, it's perfectly easy to turn. So I don't know how you measure it. I think it's something you got to work with DOT, I think, and DPW to define it if you want to go that route.
Yeah, HDOT does measure level of services, like on P1E, North Kihei Road, they do measure that. Chair, I have another question. Regarding the widening of Pi'ilani Highway to 4 lanes from what was Mokulele, now it's called Veterans Highway, all the way down, the length of Pi'ilani Highway. It's true that most of that's been widened except 1.2 miles. So there is an implementing action in the current Kihei Makena Community Plan that says that road needs to be widened to its full length, which hasn't happened yet. And that's supposed to have an effect on any major projects developed south of Kilohana. So there are projects south of Kilohana proposed. Some have been built, some haven't been built, and that highway still needs to be widened. So maybe it will, or maybe it won't, but do you think that widening the rest of the highway should determine or have an effect on major projects south of Kilohana? if it's not widened?
I'm going to answer it two ways. One is that there's other language in community plans that talks about doing it concurrently with development. And that's basically the way it's been conditioned for those three major projects, Honolulu, McKenna, and Wailea, when it got some rezonings in 1998. Either paying its pro rata share, or in Honolulu's case, do the whole thing. And that's what the community plan also says. Another one is to do it concurrently. And that's why traffic studies were done to identify at what point is it really needed? When does that intersection go to an F, right? How many vehicles? And so that's what was done. And so in Wailea's case, it set out here's how many units, and at unit number X, when you get to unit X, that's when Wailea's fair share needs to be done. And if you look at that stretch of road, you can drive that 167 hours a week practically and not have a problem. I mean, compared up here at Lipoa, it's Manini. But it does have the Pauhana traffic that comes from the hotels and construction workers that come out of that area. And, you live in Maui Meadows, right? And so it gets congested for a certain time. So Wailea's fair share is, okay, let's address where's the problem? Where's the current problem if Wailea goes first? And that's why it was identified to do the work around Kilohana, but obviously not the whole thing. It's fair share. So I think the community plan actually did a good job. It said do it concurrently, do the interregional capacity, which has basically been done, 12 miles of Kaului, and do it concurrently.
So I think, in my mind, do you think that implementing action is still fair, considering that the projects haven't been dealt with yet? Whether it's done before or concurrent, it still needs to be done, correct?
I don't have a problem with it being done. I just want to make sure the word concurrently is in there. Because if the word just concurrently is not in there, then you run into the case of, well, no one can do it.
Yeah, I think the prior to a concurrent is pretty much well established in how things are going to be done moving forward.
Yeah.
Any other questions, clarifying questions? Wayne?
David, in your background, do you feel a traffic impact fee could be assessed on any housing development to pay for the widening of the roads?
Yeah, I think it's possible. It's definitely possible. The code is there, right? It was passed in '89. You probably helped pass it. It hasn't been implemented yet. I think what's going to happen if it does pass is that the affordable units won't pay, and it'll be on everything else. But it'll be part of the solution, right? You can't generate enough money. We pay gas tax, right? We pay vehicle registration fees, bus fares, and that's not too much money, but all that adds up into the highway fund. So I think it's reasonable. And I think in the case of, I can speak for Wailea, if we had a fair share agreement that just said pay X dollars and it was justifiable, we'd probably rather do that than having to go build a section of the highway, which is not easy construction.
Thank you.
Any other clarifying questions? Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other testifiers?
Hi, Larry Stevens. Glad to see you all again. Just to add on to David's testimony about that section of the highway, I live near there, and it's not often congested. If you think about the amount of money that's going to have to go into adding those additional lanes, and think about what else you could spend it on, which might have a much more significant effect on quality of life in South Maui, I think that's worth considering because it's going to be a really expensive construction project. Second, slightly related point, the way we finance construction of these roads seems to me to be weird because we do them a bit at a time and it takes forever. And because we do it a bit at a time, it's far more expensive than it would be if we just did it. Problem is financing. There are other financing mechanisms out there, I think. One would be to sell a bond, build the road, and then charge any subsequent developers to pay back the bond. But that way you could do it efficiently, you could do it sooner, and we could all enjoy the benefits of this construction without having to wait for probably decades. If we build the Malka road the same way we're doing the South Maui Collector Road, it's going to take decades, maybe 3 or 4 decades. Do we want to wait that long? Is it sensible for us to wait that long? Okay, now let's change topics. That also applies to the regular collector road that we've all been waiting for so long. Second point, we're all switching to electric vehicles. We have a problem because we don't have enough chargers in South Maui or any other part of Maui. There is a state law that requires commercial parking lots to put vehicle chargers in them if they're of a certain size. Very few of our parking lots in South Maui have done so. We have so far failed to get the county to enforce those provisions. The county has been delegated that responsibility. So if you want to put something in the plan to say, let's get this going on this, it's not before time. Another way to reduce vehicle traffic, which has been adopted in other jurisdictions, is to reduce the parking requirements. There are some places that have eliminated parking requirements from new construction as a way of encouraging people to get around without using their vehicles or their cars. So I would encourage us to do that in South Maui because we have way too many cars, obviously. Another thing that's been talked about is getting kids to school, Malka of the highway, because right now, if they're going to walk to school, they have to cross the highway to get to the sidewalk from Ohukai or wherever. Then they have to travel north, then they have to cross the highway again. It's ludicrous. We need to have biking and pedestrian access up and down that road, except if we put it Malka of the existing developments, then it can be safe, it can be far less expensive to build, we can get it done quickly, and it can be not just for school kids, but for everybody to have a fantastic place to go. So, random thoughts, there you go. Thank you.
Any clarifying questions? Thank you. Do we have any more testifiers? Okay, closing public testimony. Yeah, and let's dive right into 1.01. Develop the proposed Kihei Transit Hub with adequate space for parking and room for expansion and interconnected with proposed multimodal paths in the area. So I did have a question of where would this be, because it seems really, really important to know that. Yeah, go ahead.
Where it's going to be would be there would be a study and to identify the best location. Identifying it here is not going to be appropriate or get the action implemented.
In that case, it should say that we need to decide on it, or there needs to be a study to find the location. Because it sounds like there's already a proposed hub that we just need to approve. That's up to who else wants to make a motion.
I move that we accept 1.01 with the addition of calling for a study to determine the location.
So something like, how is that?
Undertake a study to determine the location and develop the proposed Kihei Transit Hub.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Randall. Discussion? This looks like a fairly big one, $10 million.
That just seems so like way too much money. I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, how in the world could that cost $1 million?
It's room for expansion. Well, if there's no discussion on this, are there any objections? Okay, I find we have adopted 1.01 with that addition. 1.02, develop an additional transit hub near Ma'alaya to serve as a transfer station between the south and west sides of Maui, reducing congestion and encouraging public transit ridership.
I move to support with the same language that we just inserted into 1.01.
Do we have a second? Second by Lehua. I think this goes with, the transit hub includes many things, but I think this goes with the idea that we discussed in an earlier meeting about increasing bus frequency. Because I know people who live in South Maui and work in West Maui, and they have to time very, very carefully if they're going to take that bus. Discussion?
Chair.
Kyoki. Yeah, Kyoki.
So planning, are there any discussions about where this might be?
The thought was in the triangle area. That's why it's designated TOD in the maps.
Thank you.
That certainly makes sense. Transit-oriented corridor with a transit hub. More discussion? Any objections? I find we have adopted with that additional undertake a study. 1.02. 1.03. To increase mobility options and reduce congestion in South Maui, complete the construction of the Kihei North-South Collector Road and multi-use path, including the sections between East Waipu'ilani Road and Kau'ono'ulu Street, East Welikaha Road and Haleku'ai Street, and the section connecting Kanani Auhana Roads to Liloa Drive. So as I noted, and as testifier David said, that section from Kanani Auhana Roads to Liloa Drive would take a lot of destruction of existing houses, which were built in the late 90s and early 2000s. Most of them were approved after the plan was adopted, but I think it would actually make us look pretty silly if we had that in there.
But they could be condemned.
Is that a motion?
No, but it's just that's what condemnation's for major, public improvements.
Yeah.
I move that we accept this with the addition of Daniel's comment to make this our highest priority for South Maui.
Is there a second? Second by Jennifer. Daniel?
It's been seconded?
Second by Jennifer.
Okay. So it was the second highest priority transportation improvement priority in the previous, or the current community plan. And the first has already been achieved, so it makes sense that it is the highest priority moving up. And in in the mayor's presentation last night at the KCA, he said it was his highest priority for South Maui. And long overdue. There's so much benefits can be come from having that north-south collector road completed. I just wonder, when you complete it to Ka'uno'ulu, right? Ka'uno'ulu, and it's supposed to hook up to Kenoleo Road. And so you're going to need improvements on Kenoleo Road. It is going to have to be upgraded. Because you're going to need some way for that traffic to flow across Ka'uno'ulu Road, whether it's a roundabout or four-way intersection or a lighted intersection. And then when you go down Kenoleo Road into the older area, the road narrows quite a bit. There's roads on both sides. I mean, there are cars parked on both sides of the road. And if you're going to have a lot of cars running down there, that's going to be an issue. And then when you end up at Uwapo, right? And then what? You turn right, and then you go up to Pi'ilani Highway. You get on Pi'ilani Highway. We're not thinking about turning left because you're going to end up on South Kihei Road. So what happens there? Is that the terminus for the North-South Collector Road? And if you're going to have all that traffic turning right, going up to Pi'ilani Highway, then you might need to have some improvements on that intersection up there. So I'm saying there's more work to be done going north. So I would say that that has to be maybe considered in this action.
I think, Vernon?
So, we're county and all. So they talk story a lot with Jordan Molina. The very thing you brought up about Kenoleo Road. So Kenoleo Road, they're gonna have to do condemnation or have some kind of agreement or buy out some of those, just to make the road wider. I'm fortunate because I had the scoops back in the day for make my wall line up with South Point Village. So South Point Village, it's already set up for improvements in the future, but not where I live, all the way to Uwapu Road. So that's gonna be an issue to widen Kenoleo Road. And then we also talked about continuing Kenoleo Road behind ABC store. That would merge north towards Sugar Beach direction, that connectivity. So only because the Waiko Road Bridge is an issue. So it's kind of tricky because probably in our lifetime, maybe in another 20 years, all over there going to be inundated. So there the mayor said what he said. So we kind of got to think about this and getting PW and DOT involved more in this from what we're talking about, because maybe we got to go more Mauka. So we're going to do North-South Collector Road plus Mauka. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of time. To me, that area of South Key Road all the way to Kaunulu to Waiko Bridge, that's going to be an issue. So we need the North-South Collector Road, but it's going to be tough dealing with the old section of Kenoleo residents. And then there's talked about a roundabout where Kaunulu Road is at, before you go onto Pi'ilani Highway, and one at Waipuilani and Kulani Hakoi. So, yeah, it's a tough one because everybody on bottleneck over there at North Kihei. So, good ideas tonight. Plenty to talk about. We're gonna figure it out. There's just Yeah, just wanted to share that.
So I think the issue here is that the concept has changed, because back when the North-South Collector Road was originally envisioned, it was as a way to get be within Kihei, to travel back and forth within Kihei, not to get in and out of Kihei. That was not in the plans. But now that we have all this flooding and sea level rise and everything, the situation's changed. So I think absolutely we need to look for a way to get from the north end of Canolia Road to the highway. That's going to be the only way other than the Pilani Highway. And I just wanted to correct, if I may, Daniel, the mayor actually said it was his highest priority, not just for South Maui, but from Maui County, is the North-South Collector Road. Yeah, Lehua?
So would this be something that we would want to separate the items? So the North-South Collector Road and then the multi-use path be separate? So there's an emphasis on, I guess, possibly mitigating any future problems with the North-South Collector Road on the north end of Kihei, as Vernon stated, because I live on that side as well. So, I mean, I don't know if that's something we would want to do. Because which one, I mean, is it simultaneous or is this something that's done separately?
Daniel?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons we need the North-South Collector Road, as you stated, is there's a lot of people that live on that corridor, and they need to be able to get out of Kihei as well as get in, you know, taking into account maybe sea level rise, because where Kinoleo Park is, it's about 7 feet above sea level, and the North-South Collector Road runs parallel to that, right? So it's not that high above sea level. And the mayor said last night that probably in 10 or 15 years, you know, we're going to lose South Kihei roads. And that's the area where we're probably going to lose it, next to Kinoleo Park. So we're not going to be able to, I like Vernon's idea. Maybe we got to continue more Mauka, the North-South Collector Road, more Mauka, and hook up, I don't know how you're going to do that, up with North Kihei Road and get on that interchange, right? And not go up, make a right turn heading east onto Piilani Highway, because that's going to be a mess. Can't imagine a lot of traffic, more traffic than there is now. It's just going to back up. It's going to pile up down Uapu towards the ocean. So I think this is really important for us, because it's a number one priority of the mayor. I think it's probably one of the number one. It's my number one priority for South Maui, for this council committee. So I think we need to address this now. You know, what we want to see happen with this road in the future, next 20 years. I don't see it stopping at Uapu. Doesn't make sense to stop there, and you turn east going up to Piilani.
Mike?
Yes. This is, there's so much in our community that, from all different aspects, that we're hearing from testifiers, that we're hearing from ourselves, that this is the number one priority. It's been a top priority for KCA for, I'd say, probably most of the century, if not before. And a lot of things, when it was originally proposed as a 4-lane road, well, we're saying already now for a 2-lane road that you can't fit it in the north portion. So that was one of the reasons why the community said, no, we don't want a 4-lane road here, because you're going to have to condemn property, and it's not going to fit in here. And that was the concept of achieve what with the little portion that we have that is excellent, just Makai of Safeway, where it is a complete street. And from my point of view, what Lehua mentioned, we want to separate it. I don't think so, because then it takes years and years to complete it. We saw with that one little segment, the road was done. What happened to the Greenway? I don't know how many years it took just to put in that little strip. We had suggested many years ago going the other direction to get that portion that's parallel to the community park. Okay, if you can't build the road, why don't you just build a pedestrian path through there? Be much cheaper, much quicker. We walked that path with, who was then, David Good was the then director, and the parks director, and our council member at the time. Everybody agreed, that's a terrific idea, let's do it. But of course, it didn't happen. So that seems to be the challenge with this. And I think we have to be cautious not to stop going forward this, to say, well, if this plan is for 20 years, how much realistically of this north-south collector road is going to be on the next 20 years? These next two segments that would just get us through to Ka'auna'ulu, last I understood, that would be 10 years before that would be completed. When would the next segment done, which would be that one by the community park? That's not even proposed yet. So I'm thinking just to get that one segment through, the next 3 segments that would bring us to Welcome is 20 years away. So I don't think we have to be too concerned about doing more than that in this community plan, because I don't see the reality that we're going to do any more of that in 20 years, not at the current state that we're going. So I'm looking at the other side to say, yeah, don't be worried about how much further we can go with it. Let's make sure we include it in the plan to try and at least get that segment in the next 20 years. Mahalo.
The what?
So I think that's where my emphasis is on I mean, how realistic can, this approach be? So if we might as well do the one that you had recommended, the one by Safeway or behind Waipuelani, that seems to be more doable than going to the Kenoleo section. Because as Vernon stated, that's where I'm at the Key Youth Center, that area. So I think that's what I was trying to say is that, if there had to be an emphasis of where we could get something done, I was going to say immediately, but if that would be an area or emphasis. So that's all I was trying to state, because this is kind of broad, just trying to get somewhere done. So that looks like the most feasible area, just to my general knowledge. So like thinking about trying to get it all the way done, and then Kenoleo, then you have to go up, and like Daniel said, you can't go right up to the highway, but you can probably go through Weinberg property and do whatever you got to do, but at least get something done, because this has been a long time waiting. So that was my only emphasis, is just trying to maybe not separate it, because one is not to say that they're both not important, but just if we separate it to at least get that portion done. So I may be naive at this thought process, but I mean, this is, obviously everybody can agree it's pretty ridiculous how long it's taking, but that we could emphasize that at least get that specific portion done. So that's it.
So I would lean towards including the connecting to North Kihei Road, because it's going to be necessary. And I mean, when the next time they look at South Maui Community Plan in 10 years, they're going to ask, what, you didn't even think of how you're going to get out of Kihei when South Kihei Road is impassable at Suda Store? Vernon?
So, yeah, we should get together with Public Works, DOT, even with these guys in the back, because, we got to put our heads together on this one, because you look at those areas, we're going to probably be around to see that Waiko Bridge disappear. And Keikanu Club not going to have a club. They got to move. And that ain't going to last long too anyway, move. So, it's all about timing. It's all about the funding will happen. If the mayor said he's going to do them, he's going to do them. But we got to look Mauka. So maybe good, we got to hui up. And because, the flooding and the sea level rising just won't change. everything that took so long to happen. I mean, even if this road was open today, we'd be talking about Mauka Wanata Road anyway, so it's a tough one.
We did adopt some language earlier about adding additional entry and exit points into South Maui and into Kihei, right? Where would those be if not this Mauka bypass and then the North-South Collector Road? Jennifer?
So along with what you're saying about looking, you keep saying, let's look Mauka, let's look Mauka. Rory mentioned about moving the item about talking about moving the road into the CIP section. Does everyone see that in the last page? So Vernon, do you think that's a good idea to move this to the CIP section that would maybe address the concern and the need to move, or maybe to talk more about this Mauka Road in conjunction with the bypass that we're talking about?
Yeah, the CIP part, I'm not sure. It's still, I don't know if that's the best route to go, but I'm kind of leaning that way, that, you know, to get it done quicker. So it's something we can talk about later, the type, the CIP. Karen? Not now, right? Is that what you? Yeah, so I don't know too much CIP. I'm going to go find out though tomorrow, for sure. You know, I mean, I weird with Mauka. You know, it's just kind of when you do something Mauka, then something else will come up. You know, but we gotta shift and move, because yeah.
Brian?
So if I remember when we were writing the policies around housing, that one of the key things was that roads and infrastructure need to be put in place. So looking at the bypass actually helps to start facilitate that, especially if we start considering relocation, that type of retreat, that type of thing, is at least we have a piece of infrastructure that's now there, will be coming, potentially. So just from that perspective, connecting back to some of the policies that we were stating we wanted to add in place, just from that alone, excluding the needs of the community as a whole now, but kind of more forward thinking, to me, the bypass seems to connect the dots to where we're saying we want the future needs to go and what some of the requirements are. That doesn't mean I think that the current community doesn't get some additional kind of infrastructure and things of that nature, but to me, that kind of seems to make sense and follows the policies that we've been trying to put in place.
Mike?
Well, I think if we were on 1.03, that's not concerning the Mauka Highway. That's just talking about what we call the North-South Collector Road. So I think this is what we have to settle right now. We can look at the other one as a separate entity because that's how it's broken up. This doesn't refer to anything about that Mauka Highway, right?
Yeah, let's finish this one first before we go on to the bypass. Daniel?
Yeah, so I think we need to add an additional segment to be completed in the North-South Collector Road from Kaonaulu to North Kihei Road. We need to add that segment.
So that was, see, who made the motion?
We have
Was
friendly
Everett?
amendment.
But do you accept that? Oh, Everett accepts that, okay. Who was the second? Jennifer accepts that, okay. Tova?
The one thing that I wonder about with this is this idea Lehua had about separating out the bike path and walking path portion. Not because I wanted to hold it up, but because I do think it is, there's got to be a way for that part of it to be easier and not take so much time. The few stretches of that are paved even kind of looks a little bit like ad hoc paving in one of the sections. It enables this thing we're always talking about. I mean, how do you think I get here every week? I bike the north-south collector, which includes a lot of gravel, pushing it through gulches and a bunch of sand in 2 places, you know, having to get off my bike because you can't ride it. And I'm not the only bike treads in that line. That is being used all the time by kids going to school, even at night when I go home at dark. I got to ring my bell because there's a ton of people still using that corridor. But it's not a safe corridor because the surfaces aren't improved. So we've just talked about how it could take decades to get anything actually done properly in this tricked out way. Would it make sense to separate out a portion of that that would actually allow people to get on their bikes? And I was passed by someone on their e-bike, so there's more and more people who are out there doing it, and more people who would do it if we made that safe for alternative transportation. The difference between going down South Kihei Road on your bike and going down on the north-south collector is the difference between a near-death experience and actually really having a lot of fun. Let's maybe think about that.
Lehua?
And so with that emphasis, and maybe we can say, do we have to look at the north end of the north-south collector road and, you know, with alternative, I guess, planning, because that's what it sounds like. So like Tova said, rather than to hold up the whole thing, get that middle one done or whatever that's referred to. But we can't say complete the construction on the north-south collector road if we're going to be held up on, let's say, the north end specifically. So I think we have to take another look at that by itself. But like Tova said, just get that one portion done because we're kind of almost there. But I would agree to say yes, definitely separate it and then emphasize that we have to look at alternatives for the north end of the north-south collector road. Because it just sounds like we're not going to be able to do anything knowing that it will be probably gone at the time that we do get it done, if that makes sense.
Maybe I misunderstood, but I thought you were saying, Tova, that you wanted to get the pedestrian biking parts done, even if it takes forever to get the other parts done. Is that right?
Yes. It seems outrageous. Unfortunately, David just left. I was going to ask him because that was.
He's coming back.
Oh, he's coming back. Okay,
Yes,
good. Okay, because there's like a ground truthing part of that I'm curious about, but related to cost. But it just doesn't seem like it's so hard to throw down a little bit of pavement. It doesn't have to be this huge lift just to make it so the kids and the people with the strollers and the people who need a flat surface can connect in that way. Yes, so I do feel like separating it out, if there's an option that doesn't have to cost $10 million and take 10 years of planning, to sequence this to include that level of transit prior to having a full road done.
So Tova, okay, now, so I understand, I would support that too, if that could be done quicker. But what I'm trying to say is that the portion that is, and I could be wrong, even partially done, the one by Safeway or behind Waipuilani, it just seems like, you know, it's widened enough. I don't know if that would suffice for, to complete that, for a road or as a portion of the north-south collector. So can anybody maybe answer me if that is something that is possible to do, is to do that portion? But yes, I support what you're saying. Yeah, get that one done. If that's quicker and then this is holding it up, I mean, get that done. But I just want to know if that's even a possibility. Then I'll stop talking because if you want that done, like just get that portion done. Because if the tail end is going to hold us up, then you know what, scratch the deal then. Don't even do it. So, you know, if it's almost done, can we at least get that portion done? So, can anybody answer?
Mike?
Well, first, I'm with Tova. I do the same thing. We're certainly different skill levels as bicyclists, but I've ridden that dirt path for years for that same reason, because it's so dangerous on South Kihei Road that I would rather avoid the stones and bumps and sand than put my life on the line on South Kihei Road. And I agree with just what you're saying. I see tons of kids going to the middle school using that, some are walking. Some of the kids are carrying the skateboard because portions of it are paved enough that they can use a skateboard. But they'll carry the board on the dirt path to get to using that. And the other example of, the portion, Mackay of Safeway is really ideal to me. It's picturesque and it's safe for walking and bicycling. But if you remember the last segment that they added on the other side of the road, on the Malka side of the road, in front of the school, that too took years and years to get done. And what is it? It's a little, close, it's a little macadam strip in front of the school, and it took years to do that. And no, it's certainly not perfect, because you see the challenge that the kids that are riding the bike, well, now they have to cross to the other side of the street. So that delays it, and you got the traffic light and all that. But it's better than not having it. That the parents will say, it's not safe, so I'm not gonna let my kid ride to school on a bike. It's not safe. I will drive him. We get more traffic and all that. So I'm with that. And we see that in our current community plan, a walkable, bikeable community. Well, if we want a walkable, bikeable community, we can't get a sidewalk on South Key Road, contiguous. We've tried that for decades and decades. We can't get it. So where is the walkable, bikeable community if it's not going to be on that road, the North-South Collector Road? And it doesn't seem logical that it has to. That's the Manini part, putting that in. It's somewhat comparable to, you're going to build a road, curb gutters and sidewalks and all that. Well, then you're going to put the sidewalk in. Well, that's the Manini part. It's just putting that little strip in. It doesn't have to be reinforced. So it shouldn't add such a challenge to make it what's called a complete street. That would make it for all three modes of transportation, plus the additional ones that are coming now. With the, you can tell I'm old. I'm saying the new skateboards, the new e-bikes, so that we're getting more non-vehicle transportation, which is better for so many ways for our community. Thank you.
So I would actually think that we should make a separate action then, because this one, it talks about completing the North-South Collector Road as a complete street. But you're proposing that we also, since that's going to take a really long time, that we, in the meantime, look into other ways to provide pedestrian and bike transportation along that corridor. Is that right? Yeah. So I think making that a separate action, I think, would be easier to process.
If you look at the screen, there's two separate actions. The first one says to increase the congestion on South Maui, complete the construction on the Kihei North-South Collector Road. I just added this language while you guys were talking. The other thing you can do is to prioritize, say, including the sections, but then prioritize the ones that you know are going to be easy. And maybe do the opposite with the construction of the North-South Collector multi-use path. So the second one is for the multi-use path. So they would be two separate actions.
Yes, go ahead.
David Good, calling you out at the back of the room for playing with your phone. No, just kidding. No, I am really calling you out. I was wondering if we could ask a question about this. Is it magical thinking that there could be such thing as a just straight up multi-use bike path that was faster to design, permit, and get done than a road? Than the complete package? I mean, a couple of strong people in a cement mixer in a weekend and someone looking the other way, we could get it done. Is there some middle ground?
Thanks, Karen. Trying to think how best to answer this. First of all, you used a sentence that had the word faster and design, permit, and construct in the same sentence. Can't do that. You need like an emergency declaration, right, from the governor, and all of a sudden you get things done. That's really it in a nutshell. It really always comes down to funding, from from the DPW side, it's funding and resources, right? How much resources does the department have to get projects done? And there's 1,000 lane miles of roadways in Maui County. As much as we love South Maui, same questions got to come from Lahaina, come from Molokai, come from Bahia. So juggling your resources internally, what you have available, and what funding you get from the council. So that's kind of a medium-sized answer. So I think anything's possible, but the department's always hesitant to put in infrastructure they feel is going to get ripped up when the other infrastructure comes in. So a sidewalk by itself will just be gone and redone in the near future. So that's the challenge.
Everett?
I worry if we separate them, we're gonna get the pathway, and they're gonna check the box, and South Maui got the pathway. Let's move on to Haiku, let's move on to something else. I think it's separating it is going to delay the roadway. That's just my feeling.
So back to my original, it wasn't separating the bike path. It was just separating the north-south collector, emphasizing which areas could be done sooner rather than later, because of the fact that now we're going to have a problem with doing whether you're going to call the beginning from Kenoleo as the start or the end. But somehow between East Waipuilani Road and Ka'ono'olu, it looks like it might be more doable. So I don't know if they'll allow us to do in increments like that. So that's what I was saying at the beginning. The separation component came from, and I'm not trying Tovas, I get that, because I would support that. But my emphasis was just saying, what can we get done? Like rather than, sometimes you cannot do the whole thing, can we just at least get this portion done? And so I'm gonna ask a really maybe stupid question, but why is it not completed? I need to hear this from somebody. Why is it not completed?
Dave probably has a better view of this, but I don't know. When we did the subdivision you live in, we had to do that portion of it, but the subdivision across the street didn't have to do it. So I don't know. I don't know why some projects were required to do it and other projects weren't required to do it.
So if we could have David Good, is it possible for you to answer my question of why? And in layman's term, real easy for us to understand so we can maybe move on, but real simple.
Okay, can you rephrase the question like real quick?
Why is this north-south collector road not completed?
It's kind of an expansion of what I talked about earlier. Money primarily. There was a point where it was largely funded by the state and feds, but at that time it was I'm gonna call it like the 80s, 90s mentality of 4 lanes, all pavement, all sidewalk, and that didn't fly with the community. And so then the money evaporated. It's back, they're designing it, they're pretty far along from the last I mean, it's been 3 years since I've been there, right? So it was it's in design, and they're struggling to get the money from the NPO, and it's on the list to be funded, at least the first phase of it. So I think if anything, we just need to encourage them to keep going.
What is the first phase?
I believe the first phase is Waipuilani to Kalaniakoi, is that right? Yeah. Get over that gulch, just keep marching north.
Yeah. So they started, like, can you, what does that mean, they started?
Design and permitting. So you gotta have a design, you gotta design that bridge, that's the tricky part.
And then, so they started designing, permitting, but nothing's like solid, like hasn't totally been approved. And I get it with the money thing, but let's pretend it has nothing to do with money. But in reality is, if we had the money, it would be done.
I think so.
Okay, so.
I think so. Like, for instance, I just read Mayor Bisson's State of the County. He says he's gonna put a bunch of money in emergencies, which we need. That money would do this project. Right there.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Daniel?
I think all the ducks are lining up now, like we haven't had before. The community wants it, and the administration wants it. The mayor says he wants to see this done. And I don't think we've been as lined up to push this forward in a very motivated way than we are today. So I think we have the momentum. The wave is, there's a wave is coming. I think we can ride the wave to really get this project done. It's my opinion.
Mike?
I would just offer that the next segment, they haven't even applied for the SMA permit yet. So to say, it's moving along. If you haven't even applied for the SMA permit for the next section, it's still 10 years away before it could happen. And why haven't they applied? I don't know. Every time I ask, you get varying answers, but that's for sure. They have not yet applied for the SMA for that portion from Waipualani to Kalaniakoi. Thank you.
Everett?
To me, it's crazy that we have to get an SMA permit for something. It's a public improvement. It's a public benefit. It's sidewalks, curbs, gutters, bike paths, roadway that the community has been waiting for so many years. To me, it's just, I think this is one of those over-regulation things that we hold ourselves back as a community. But that's.
Yeah, so the SMA okay, but so like when they come and they do improvement, like grading in areas, but and then where SHPD gets involved and stuff like that. Well, that's why good we stay, because we can help move that process and not take so long, because we still got to do all the SHPD stuff, check those boxes, but with some of the information I may have or others may have, we provide whatever we can for the, what is that, the CIS? AIS. But with monitoring. So we can, it's not the right word, fast track, but we're going to be involved. Make sure that these kind of projects be cared for.
So before I hand over to Everett, I think it seems like most people have been agreed on the first part there, the 1.03. Actually, no, the previous 1.03. Let's see.
That's it.
That's one.
That's
Okay,
it.
yeah, that one. Okay, so why don't can we separate that and then talk about, so we can put that out of the way and then talk about making a separate action for just the path? Because we're kind of circling and circling and circling here. Karen?
There's a motion on the floor for the whole policy, the way it is, so.
Toa?
I don't want to keep this going, but I have a little concern about the last bit, to North Kihei Road. If this is something that's going to take forever, North Kihei Road, we've already decided, it's out of there. We have to figure out a road that goes behind Kealia. So we're now designing something to go to where we've already decided is completely obsolete with climate change.
It's just going to, that's the way to get to the highway. That's the closest way to get to the highway. It's not North Kihei Road to Ho'opilani.
Is that tail is called?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. It's just how to get to the highway.
Scratch that. Let's not put it down.
So we have a motion. Any further discussion on that motion? Which is just adding the additional section to the proposed text. And we have make it the highest priority. That was also part of Daniel's, I think that was part of the motion, right? Make it the highest priority.
Yes, it was. That was Everett's motion.
Daniel's thought on motion.
There's only low, medium, and high, so high would be the highest.
Can we put number one priority?
I think Daniel's suggestion was actually put in the text that's the highest priority of the roadway improvements in the South Maui Community Plan area.
That's correct.
And then Everett proposed that too. Highest priority for roadway improvements in the South Maui Community Plan area. And it's roadway improvements. Okay. Are we ready for a decision here? Any objections? Okay, fine, we've adopted that one. So it's about time for a break, but do we want to knock off the question of a separate pathway action first? Toa?
Based on the feedback from David, I think that the separate pathway won't expedite it. And no one wants to build something and rip it out. It sounds like we're going for the guerrilla cement mixer weekend and everyone turning a blind eye option. All right.
Okay. 7-minute break. How's that? Okay, resuming at 7:20 p.m. So let's see. We have quorum. So let's see. We have some things suggested below this on below 1.03 there. One was this road running parallel to Enmauka Pilani Highway, which is, of course, is very much like this. I note that this actually does say, it calls it the it calls it the Kihimauka bypass. So it's consistent with the way it's been treated in the past. So if there's anyone who would like to make a proposal concerning the Mauka bypass, a motion to that, we could discuss that. Toa?
I move to adopt as written.
Could you formulate it, because there's not really well formulated here.
There is a policy for this later on. The 1.13 is an identify new multimodal transportation corridor through South Maui to Central Mauka of Pi'ilani Highway. It's the one that Rory was referring to, bringing it up to that section. I'm not really sure why the CIP section's separated out, honestly, because as you see right above it, there's the one above it's CIP as well.
Yeah, what happened? I don't know. And then 110 said.
So which item is the one that would cover the Mauka bypass?
1.13.
1.13.
And part of you could say
Okay.
identify and implement,
Got
but
it.
the identifying is also so landowners know where they shouldn't build for the future.
Okay, I'm sorry then for introducing that. Let's just stick with the order here. So let's see. So that comes later. How about the Kealia bypass road? Does that come, is there a proposal for that too?
Chair Rob. Over here.
Oh, wait, go ahead.
So I noticed that in your notes, and thankful you put that in there. I'm imagining you put it on this page because if we were to, let me tell you where I'm going with that. Because in the 98 Kiewele plan, it was mentioned a lot more firmly and in two different portions, right? And so far in our review of this draft plan, it was sort of mentioned, buried in action in the next section. So I was thinking of proposing an actual separate action for this, just to kind of resurrect this. And I know that there's a lot more higher priority items, so the priority can be talked about, but I wanted to know how you felt about, everyone felt about. I have the language, if you guys want to hear it, to propose a separate action for the Kealia bypass road. Excuse me?
Start talking, I'll start typing.
Okay, so here's a motion for a new action regarding the Kealia bypass road. So plan and implement the Kealia bypass road and explore the possibility of using a portion of the current road for a walk/bike path to the boardwalk after the bypass is completed. That's the gist of it. And so my reasoning is, from my heart, it's conservation and preservation. And then from what we've been discussing and discovering along this process is the sea level rise. There's areas over there that are pretty quick if we don't restore a good portion of the sand dune that retains the ocean from swamping that place in multiple areas. It's going to be gone soon too. Yeah, those are my reasons.
Second.
Second by Everett. Discussion?
Discussion.
Yeah, discussion.
Yeah. So just, I don't know if you guys recall, but in this plan, under implementing actions in the Kihewailea Plan 98, 24 years ago, you guys, it said support the development of the Maui-Kealia Bypass Highway. And then that was under a section C. And then D, it says develop a master plan for recreational coastline access along the North Kihei Road once the Maui-Kealia Bypass is planned. Now, that recreational part of it kind of is in my motion, so sure.
So the boardwalk that the walk/bike path to the boardwalk, is it after what bypass is complete? What are you referring to?
So the vision I have, and this is just personal, you know, like personally, I see that road going behind the power plant, coming around the whole conservation area, and then somehow coming up to the Veterans Highway, somewhere behind there. Now, for the current road, as far as usage, an idea that I've kicked around in my head is to demo probably up to 2/3 of it, and leave room for replenishing and restoring the dunes in different sections. Yeah. Because how are people going to get from West Maui to Kihei? What do you? Well, the vision I have, like, for a walk bike path is to utilize, where the road is now. So once the new road is Paul, then you can demo like 2/3 or whatever the community, and yeah, and you can come to it from both sides, yeah, from the power plant side or the North Kihei side, and that way there's access culturally. The place is super significant, and people can get their recreation, and you can still have room for emergency UTVs in case something goes down. Fire department has those in case there's a medical emergency or something. There's still access emergency-wise. Yeah, it's safer. It's a beautiful place, and I think we drive through it every day, and I just can't see why we're still doing that in this day and age. I think if people actually stopped and walked through there, as a child, I came from the Maui side, from the West End, and we used to call it mud flats, and of course we did things in there that we shouldn't have done growing up, right? Motorbike and scrambling with the 4x4s, but if we knew then what we know now, it would have been holy. But anyway, it's a beautiful place if you stop, take the time to walk through it, look at it, take in the smells and the sounds. Thank you, guys.
Discussion? Any objections? Jennifer?
Do we set the priority and all of the other things at this point? How does that work, Karen?
We haven't done that in the past. I think we'll do that when we
No.
get to
Okay.
prioritization of actions. Any objections? Adopted a new action on the Kealia Bypass Road. Daniel had some suggestions here. One was about level of service. Another one was about require adequate interregional highway capacity. I'm not proposing that you combine those. I'm just saying those are a couple of things.
Chair, Yes. I can speak to the level of service. So this is the language I like to use. During peak traffic hours, the regional LOS, level of service standards, are as follows. LOS D or better in urban centers and corridors. Level of service C or better everywhere else. And so, yeah. See, during peak traffic hours, the level of service is D or better for urban centers and corridors. And C or better everywhere else. That would be my motion, but maybe to help educate what that means, level of service standards, I'll just quickly read a description.
Should we get a second first?
Sure.
Is there a second for that motion? Second by Mike.
Can I ask you something? Is this part of the Kealia or is this a separate action?
It's separate.
We're done with Kalia.
No, I know, but it just looks like it's written as part of, so that's why we're asking.
I just didn't get a thing to work.
Yeah, but just have to ask you.
Who seconded it?
Mike.
Oh, Mike. So in discussion, a level of service A means the highest driver comfort, free flowing. This is a traveler's experience, right? If you're in a car, this is what you're experiencing. Level of service B, high degree of driver comfort, little delay. Level of service C, acceptable level of driver comfort, some delay. D, some driver frustration, moderate delay. E, high level of driver frustration, high levels of delay. F, highest level of driver frustration, excessive delays, and massive road rage. No. So D is some driver frustration, moderate delay. So that would be nice to have that, you know, during peak traffic hours, because a lot of places, levels of service on our main corridors are E and F during peak travel hours. So yeah, that's my motion. It's something to strive for.
Tova?
I guess I'm wondering what you thought about Dave's comments about potential unintended consequences. Because I read this too. There's nothing there that says don't build another lane, where my solution would be build the north-south collector bikeway, and then more people will ride their bike. So you're not dictating that this problem is solved holistically. And so you are leaving yourself open to unintended consequences if the only way to do that is just to make everything bigger, wider, more.
It's a measuring stick, you know, to see how well we're doing with our traffic and land use. Is land use exasperating the levels of service? And if it is, that's something you can control, right? The amount of traffic that gets on the highway. So it's just a guide, a measuring stick that this would be good to achieve a level of service where you're not frustrated and there are excessive delays. That's F. So that happens during if I'm talking about peak traffic hours, we probably have to define that. But you know, usually in the morning for an hour or so, and in the afternoon for an hour or so, maybe 1 or 2 hours. Maybe that would have to be defined. But peak traffic time is usually defined, pretty well defined by the Hawaiian Department of Transportation. I'm sure the county can define what that means. I'm not defining it here. It's pretty obvious when people are going to work and coming home from work. But I think if we don't have some sort of regional standard, and then we'll just settle for the F and E's, then we're all going to be miserable, stuck in gridlock in Pi'ilani Highway and South Kihei Road. So I think it's a good tool.
I just comment that requiring level of service does not mean requiring more lanes. It could be requiring better public transportation, other ways to get around, less cars on the road. So there are other solutions too. Leroy?
Daniel, what can we refer for your action? Is you want to implement this plan, and then if you refer to, is this like a federal type of a grading system, just so we can have a name attached to it, so we have to refer to it outside of, tonight.
This is what HDOT uses, Hawaiian Department of Transportation.
Okay. Can we insert that in there to say that? So if anybody's curious as to where, and I apologize if you had stated that before, but because I want to support you.
It's used nationally too.
Okay, perfect
Yeah.
then. Yeah, it should state it.
It's a national standard.
Okay, yep, just wanted to hear that, so. But as an action, you're gonna add more verbiage to it. Yeah, I don't know.
What do you suggest?
Implementing the standard or something, plan and implement from Jennifer. Because I like it.
Sure.
Brian?
So I can add some verbiage for you. But with that, let me add the verbiage first. So I would just develop and implement during peak traffic, so on and so forth. I guess develop and implement a program to monitor and respond during peak traffic hours, and then the rest of that. The question I would ask is, are we setting the bar too low with D? And should we not set the bar higher at C? Because to Tova, to your point, it doesn't mean necessarily you have to build more lanes. It's why not create a level of C with augmented bike paths, so on and so forth, versus saying we're willing to accept worse traffic with a D level and maybe not implement the other things that'll counter that to make it a C. So I would suggest we raise it up to B, or where we have a D, make it a C, where it's a C, make it a B. And if we fail, we can always then review it. But if we shoot too low, then we aren't really fixing the problem.
Jennifer?
But I think we need to, I'm sorry, that should be a friendly amendment to the language that we should accept or not accept.
That's not your exact wording.
You know, there's a few words.
So he's making two suggestions. One was to add that initial sentence, and second one was to change it from D to C.
Yeah, so like changing from D to C, going back to one of our testifiers. C, what is C? C is minor delay. Acceptable level of driver comfort and some delay during peak traffic hour. That would be C. D would be, as it is, some driver frustration, moderate delay. Yes, I don't know, C. I'm fine with C, but it's really a high bar. I think if you're talking about peak traffic and there's a lot of people at intersections, I don't know if you're going to have acceptable levels of driver comfort. You know, I don't know. C or D?
Everett?
I was at a public meeting a few months ago, and it was regarding a project on the other side of the island. And somebody was complaining about traffic, and a person stood up and said, you know, if I have to wait in traffic for another 5 minutes in order for someone to have a house, I'm fine with that. So I think D is better than C.
Lihua?
So this is the level D isn't like a grade, like A, B, C, D, E, A, B, C, D, F, correct? That's not what it's referencing, yeah? So, and I wanted to say that. So, and again, could you repeat where is this coming from? Hawaii Department of?
It's used by the state, the Hawaii Department of Transportation, and it's a standard that's used nationally. You know, level of service is something that's used across the country.
No, because I wanna look it up to support you, but I would like to see it, include that in there, so other people who see it can instantly go to that website to make reference to the letters that you are using. So for me, D is fine, but to somebody else, D might be like you just right above F, and they're not going to support
It is right above that.
Well, technically, F meaning failure. That's it. You know
F
what I
is
mean?
failure, yeah.
Okay, well then
It's
maybe
like, it is like a grade, yeah.
But I mean, because do you have standard A and B?
Yeah, standard A is highest driver comfort, free flowing. That's A.
Yeah, so
That's like midnight.
Yeah, so I want people to be able to know where you're getting this from, so they can look. And all kidding aside, I mean, I just need to see and understand. Yeah, D is like almost failing.
I can read from the State Department of Transportation. It says, A is free flow operation, vehicles are almost complete.
I don't need you to read it to me. I just want to make sure that when people read this, they're going to say, oh, we're going to go straight to the Hawaii Department of Transportation and I can interpret it myself. But if it's not there, where are we getting this from? So I want to make sure we understand where we're getting our information from. So I support Daniel all the way, but I just wanted to make sure people, if it is F is F, it's the failure, then it is. But I didn't know if it was some kind of code that did not mean that exactly. So, yeah, so my friendly amendment is, yeah, the Hawaii Department of Transportation website, whatever. So that's perfect. Thank you.
Mike?
Yeah, I just wanted to offer that I became somewhat familiar with this level of service over last decade or before when at KCA we often review proposed projects. And that was always one of the considerations. Well, how, if this project is approved, how is it going to affect the traffic? And most of the developers would hire a traffic engineer to do a study and count how many cars went through it, so many hours, and then advise professionally what that level of service was. And one that always stuck in my mind, maybe because I pick out the negative, but was a traffic, just the professional said when he was asked at the Planning Commission, what would be the level of service? And he said F. And they said, well, isn't that failing? So why would you approve it? He said, it's already an F, so you're only going to make it an F. Not that it's going to be any worse, it's just going to be another F because you can't get any lower. And the commission approved it. He said, okay, well, we'll approve this project. So yes, I think it's important that we look at this and have those definitions readily available to everybody to what these levels of service means. And yes, we all get that it's only certain times a day. The places that have the worst traffic jams, yeah, at midnight they work fine. So then you can say, oh, it's level of service A at that time. So it's key as to when you're looking, if you're going to define that level of service, when are you going to look at it? Are you going to look at it the busiest times or not? Mahalo.
That's true in a sense, but on the other hand, the Department of Transportation, the State Department of Transportation actually gives a global evaluation of each segment, not just for time of day. And it says, it shows red, it shows F for Pilani Highway, South Kihei Road, North Kihei Road. But,
yeah, if I could jump in here as well too. So a lot of different countries have different levels of service, and it's not just for traffic. So for like the United States, one of the main parties that establishes LOS is the American Association of State Highways and Transportation Officials, or AASHTO. Some of these are established at the federal level, but as Daniel mentioned, once you get more to the local level, each DOT typically adopts it. But the LOS can be different for, let's say you have a major highway, you're moving X number of vehicles at one time versus, let's say, a local collector. The volume moving down that you're going to have a big straw or a smaller straw. So the LOS is just, I'm not going to say it's a sliding scale, but it is to a certain degree. And the LOS, I guess to Tova's point, it's like some communities intentionally retain a bad vehicular LOS to force people to be uncomfortable, to get out of their cars, to start bicycling. So it depends if you're a driver or you're a bicyclist. If you don't drive, then maybe an LOS doesn't matter because you're not behind the wheel. If you are a driver, LOS is a big deal, So I guess just keep that in mind. Often the LOS is a goal. And someone who was commented before, we can keep on adding lanes, but there's going to be a cost at some point, and it may improve things during that peak level service, but middle of the night, no one's on the road anyway. So it's like, I don't know if there necessarily is a right answer. I agree. It's good to have a target of hey, LOS A. We're probably never going to get there. F is terrible. Where do we strike that balance in between? It's a goal, but it's hard to implement necessarily. So I guess, long story short, if we look at this the text here maybe is identifying a desired goal of LOS, whatever, but achieving is going to be something a little bit different.
Sure, just point of order,
Yes.
there's two friendly amendments that haven't been voted on.
Well, they have to be accepted, but if,
Well, meaning that we haven't done that yet, so.
I know, but I mean, Daniel has to either accept them or reject them.
Well, the first one was C or D, right? So I
was
I
one.
think probably go with D.
So he's not accepted.
Was
And then-
that what you were
So
recommending?
so there's actually then three. So there was the initial verbiage in the first sentence, the recommendation to change D to C, and then Lahua's additional recommendation at the end.
Oh, yeah, I accept the, I'm fine with the adding the, thank you, Leo. The Hawaii Department of Transportation, the first sentence was the other one. Develop and implement a program to monitor peak level of service. Develop and implement a program. Yeah, I guess I'm fine with that.
Mike's okay too? Okay. So it stays as on the screen. So I think just to point out that one reason for doing this, for having action about this, is to point out that when we consider developments, like particularly this is going to happen when we discuss North Key and Kiamauka, is this an important issue? Level of service, and what level of service we want to maintain if we're going to do development there. So I think that's where this comes into play. And of course, we would like to improve the level of service we already have, but we certainly don't want to let it get worse. By the way, the DOT map, as well as almost everything I've read, it says F or worse. I mean, F or less. So. Okay, so we have a motion. We have a second. Any further discussion? Any objections? Okay, adopted with the adopted as on the screen. Develop and implement. Down to according to Hawaii Department of Transportation.
And then I guess I had the other one, right?
You had another one about interregional highway capacity.
Yeah, so this comes right out of the Kihei McKenna Community Plan. I think it's page 31. Require adequate interregional highway capacity, including the widening of all of Pi'ilani Highway to 4 lanes prior to the construction of major projects south of Kilohana Road or Mauka Pi'ilani Highway. So I'd like to make this a motion, and I hope we get second for discussion.
Is there a second? Second by Jennifer. Everett?
Can we say prior to or concurrent with?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. You
Jennifer?
can add concurrent. So this was something that in my question and answer with David, I discussed how the Pi'ilani Highway hasn't been widened all the way to its full extent. There is still that section below Maui Meadows from Kilohana to Wailea Ike. So that has to be done. And specifically, I think at this point, what I was looking at as far as prior to the construction of major projects south of Kilohana or Mauka Pi'ilani Highway, I'm thinking south of Kilohana, Mauka Pi'ilani from Kilohana. I'm not talking about the entire extent of the highway before Kilohana, north of Kilohana. I'm talking after Kilohana, so projects constructed. That affects one project. That's Wailea 670. And the widening of the highway is a condition of zoning for Wailea 670, Honua'ula Partners LLC. That's something that is already required for them to do. but there are other projects that may come online south of Kilohana. So I think it's important for that road to be widened based on the current Kihei McKenna Community Plan, and it should carry over to this plan, because there's no guarantee that it's going to be widened until it is widened.
So isn't this a policy? Yeah, this is a policy, not an action. I mean, we can still adopt the policy here, but this is a guidance to the planning department. Brian?
So two quick things. One, the friendly amendment that Everett made to have prior to or concurrent. But then Dan, I guess, question.
Yeah, I accepted that.
Okay, sorry, I didn't hear. Is what do you consider to be major?
Yeah, that's a good question, because that's the language that's in the current Kihei McKenna Community Plan. So what is a major project?
Because in my mind, I would look at some of the stuff in McKenna. Some would consider some of it major. Some would consider some of it not major, based on the quantity of units. So I would want to make sure we don't have a loophole where someone has acreage and says, well, I'm only putting a fraction of things in, but it does put stress on the infrastructure, and they can get around that by breaking up parcels and stuff like that.
Maybe we can ask planning for what could be a definition for major.
Often we might have a threshold of dollar investment, acre size, unit count. I don't know if we've really seen a magic number of what's considered major.
Everett?
I think in the context of this, it would be traffic. I think if we're talking about roadways. I think major would be defined as how many additional cars is the project putting on the road. I don't think it's so much acreage, because you could have a 100-acre project with 5 houses, which isn't going to be much, or you could have a 5-acre project with 150 condos. So I think we're talking traffic counts, and I don't know if there's something in the industry standards for that. I'm not familiar enough with traffic design, roadway design.
So while I agree with that in concept, what I hear specifically in a lot of these developments for South Maui, and I can use my own community as an example, is it's not full-time people. So a lot of the statistics are based on, oh, well, 70% of those people aren't going to be there, 80% of the time. So therefore, we don't have to do anything but when people are here, they're all here at the exact same time across every community, and it becomes a nightmare. So I think how we're currently viewing the statistics and making those decisions is skewed from the reality of what actually happens. And that doesn't include tourists that are coming, so I don't know the answer. I just think that we keep using the same perspective of all these homes are being built, but they're only going to be partially used, so it's really not a big deal. But if you take just high season from November through March, it's a completely different experience, and it's extremely painful.
Maybe we table this one, and if planning can talk to Jordan and see what maybe Jordan knows how to define major in this context.
Daniel?
Yes.
You want to refer it or decide it now?
No, I want to hear your question.
Well, so construction of major projects in parentheses, i.e. traffic impact. Like, for example, to consider traffic impact. So this might allow us to proceed with moving forward with the motion. And that can be later, confirmed by Jordan, but such as, traffic impact in the surrounding area to define that major projects. If that might help with that.
Brian?
So one of the things that I can add, I'll speak specifically for my community and then a little bit from WCA, is that we've seen since COVID a significant shift of the number of full-time people, or tipping to full-time maybe 3/4 of the year here. In our community alone, we had a transition of about 35 to almost 40% of our units. And that tipped, previously we had a very, very low volume of full-time residents. We are now averaging about 70 units out of 150, so almost half are full-time, where we were about 30% before. Speaking from a WCA perspective, I know in many other communities they're starting to see the same type of trend. So again, I don't know if traffic is 100% the mix. I don't know the answer. It's the statistics of what we're seeing over the past couple of years, specifically from COVID. We're seeing a dramatic shift of the number that are people that are here on a regular full-time basis.
To me, Louis' suggestion makes sense, because what we're talking about is the impact on traffic, right? That's why we need to condition the widening of the road. So, major traffic impact. Garrett?
Would it be appropriate to just include in this text when we identify prior to or concurrent with construction of major projects, comma, as determined by Hawaii DOT and County DPW, comma, or do you want to just defer to them within the text here? Leave it up to the traffic engineers to figure out whether we consider that major versus minor threshold?
I think that if it was, if we said major traffic impact, it would still go back to them to determine that anyway. So I think the end result is really the same. I think the point is that what we're concerned about is the impact on traffic, right?
I think that's one of the major concerns is impact. I think this needs, I don't know, right now I feel like it needs more, maybe more time to stew, in the pot. I think I would be willing to defer it and come back to it. And just leave the, we have here and come back to it.
So when you say defer, you mean to get an opinion from the planning department, or just you're going to come back to it?
I mean, for us to come back to it.
Or just for us to come back to it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, if the committee is fine with that.
Okay.
Or if they want to vote now.
Well, you are the one who proposed it. You can withdraw it.
Yeah, I want to defer it.
Okay. Moving on to 1.04, apply for federal grants such as the U.S. Department of Transportation's Rebuild American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity RAISE grant that can help fund the completion of transportation projects, including the North-South Collector Road.
Moved.
Moved by Everett and second by Tova. Discussion. Very controversial thing you're proposing. I don't want those funds, sorry. Any objections? Okay, fine, we have adopted 1.04. 1.05, plan and complete a South Maui Greenway multi-use path system linking all of South Maui and including numerous east-west segments like PK Avenue, East Lipoa Street, and Ohokai Road, connecting Pi'ilani Highway to South Kihei Road. And a comment from Maui Tomorrow through Natalie was that we already have the South Maui Region Parks and Open Space Master Plan, which is kind of old, but it's rather than doing yet another plan, which will go on the shelf like so many plans have gone, maybe we should update that existing one. So her suggestion was to replace the beginning of that with update the Greenway section contained within the South Maui Region Parks and Open Space Master Plan and create an implementation timeline for South Maui, etc. A motion, sorry, Mike?
Yes, I propose that, to make a motion to use that language that Natalie suggested, the update in place of the original language.
Second by Tova. Discussion? It's been a while since I read that, but there was some good stuff in there, as I recall.
It's excellent stuff in there, and for years we had a printed copy in the KCA office. But fortunately for KCA, we have found a very astute tech person who now has it on our website. So if you want to read it, it's available on the KCA website.
Discussion? Any objections?
I'm sorry, I have to do that. 105?
Yes.
Yeah, it's amended. I just want to see what's written up here.
I got it. Any objections? Adopted 1.05 with that addition at the beginning. 1.06, plan and implement adaptation measures to address the impacts of sea level rise and increased flooding on South Kihei Road. Everett?
I agree with your comment, Rob, to delete. I move that we delete this. Since it's covered in the area that we covered last week.
Second by Jennifer. Discussion? Any objections? Okay, we're moving 1.06. 1.07, develop the South Maui Transit-Oriented Development Corridor Master Plan that will identify opportunities to locate transit hubs, increase access to jobs, services, and housing, and improve pedestrian safety. Just a question to planning. Is this under the MPO or who it is? Okay.
Currently, MPO does not have the authority to run the transit-oriented development, but they are play a heavy role in it.
Do we have a motion?
Moved.
Moved by Everett. Do you have a second? I think Tova gets this one. Tova gets this one. Discussion. Any objections? Okay, fine, we've adopted 1.07 as proposed. I put in here the couple of the suggestions from Larry in case anyone wants to pick them up. First one was to make the crowded part of South Kihei Road a one-way street. And the second one I have here is get employers to install EV chargers for their workers. Okay, moving on. 1.08, create transportation demand management strategies for South Maui that shift commuter priorities away from driving alone to reduce congestion. And Natalie from Maui Tomorrow proposes a little bit different text. Implement the transportation demand management strategies of the MPO. For example, so what she's proposing is to combine 1.08 and 1.09. So it'd be implement the transportation demand management strategies of the MPO. For example, providing incentives to partner with South Maui employers to sponsor flexible work schedules, bus passes, shuttles, rideshare, bike facilities, or other multimodal programs to connect employees to jobs.
So moved.
Moved by Everett. Second by Brian. Karen?
So is the motion to replace those two with the language Natalie proposed?
Exactly. Yep. So open for discussion. So I've said this before, I think, in earlier meetings. There are some really good ideas in the MPO's transportation demand management write-up, or their document. And rather than do yet another study, it'd be good to start implementing some of the great studies we already have. Doesn't really change the meaning of any of this, just kind of focuses a little bit. Tova?
I haven't read that plan. Does anyone know if it also talks about EV charging stations put in by employees?
It does not.
Okay, I mean, I don't want to mix things up, but I do actually think that that's important. And while it doesn't get a car off the road, it gets some of the pollution off the road. And the human health impact of each additional car is quite astounding when you see the math on it. But I don't have to muddy the waters.
I think that's a slightly different topic. I mean, you could combine them, but this is really about transportation demand management rather than the types of transportation. I would like to see that too, though. Daniel?
So you're thinking there's another place in the plan to put that EV, get employers to install EV chargers for the workers?
You can make a motion.
No, I'm asking, is there another place in the plan to do that? I'm not aware of it.
Well, I mean, no, I mean, it would be going to this transportation section, I think. It's just,
Okay.
wouldn't necessarily go into this particular action. Discussion on the motion, which combines 1.08 and 1.09. Any objections? Fine, we have adopted the language proposed by Natalie. .10. Retrofit existing streets with pedestrian and bike facilities using complete streets and Vision Zero Maui principles, where appropriate, to improve connections throughout South Maui neighborhoods and around recreation and commercial areas. Priority areas include sidewalk and intersection improvements discussed in the Helemai Maui Long Range Transportation Plan. So again, Helemai Maui Long Range Transportation Plan, that is the MPO. Is there a motion for this?
So maybe it's more like identifying places to do this? That would that help?
That'd
To
be
make
more
it
of an
more
action.
committal?
That'd be more of an action. I think it's a good thing to express support for these ideas that were developed within the MPO. But I think, yes, something specific like identifying streets that can be retrofitted, for example, with pedestrian bike facilities. That's an action.
Okay, I'll make that motion.
Do you
What
get
you just
that,
said.
Karen? Identify streets that can be identify existing streets that can be retrofitted with.
I'm confused how the existing language doesn't say what the language you're trying to say says. Because it says retrofit existing streets with pedestrian and bike facilities using complete streets and Vision Zero Maui principles. Those are saying the guiding, you want it to look like complete streets, not like a highway. And you want it, the Vision Zero, you want nobody to be dying on the streets. And you want the streets to be retrofitted. Something that's being retrofitted already exists. I'm just confused why we're changing it.
So is this like retrofit all existing streets, some existing streets, an existing street? That's the point they identify. Lua?
But it says where appropriate, so would that suffice? To not say that it's everything, but just where it's appropriate? Because it may not be able to do it in one area. Yeah. So it's not saying everywhere, but just.
Identify where it would be appropriate.
Mhm.
It does say where appropriate.
Yeah. Sorry.
It says it already.
You're killing the English major in me right now. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I'm trying to help you out.
I'm just pointing it out because it says where appropriate, so I don't think we have to identify, because it's just
Okay.
saying where appropriate.
If it says where appropriate, yes. Okay.
Yeah, support good.
Okay.
We're just messing with you, Karen. Sorry, Karen.
Okay. It's,
Go back to the original language.
back to the original language. Okay.
Okay, I'll make the motion to make the existing language 1.10. That's my motion.
Is there a second? Second by Jennifer. Oh, too late. Sorry, next time. Discussion? Any objections? Okay, I find we have adopted 1.10 as written. 1.11, install continuous unobstructed sidewalks, bicycle lanes, and crosswalks on South Kihei Road. Prioritize crosswalk at Azika Plaza and improve pedestrian protection at Kalama Park Crosswalk. And we have a couple of alternative suggestions here, one from Mike and one from Daniel. The one from Mike says install 4-foot wide sidewalks were missing on South Kihei Road for critically needed continuous sidewalks. Concurrently create a 6-foot wide bike paths adjacent to the sidewalk separated by a 30-inch wide unpaved green strip. And Daniel's alternative is install continuous unobstructed sidewalks, bicycle lanes, and crosswalks on South Kihei Road. Prioritize crosswalk at Walaka. Is that Walaka? and South Kihei Road, and improve pedestrian and bicycle protection between Pi'ikea and Ka'ono'ulu roads.
Yes, except prioritize. There is an existing crosswalk at Walaka. What I think what it needs is to have one of those lights, crossing lights, because of the many pedestrian accidents that have occurred there, and that would be a need. Not crosswalk, but what do you call those flashing lights, crossing lights that we have on South Kihei? Pedestrian. Yeah.
Rectangular.
Yes, to have one of those. So there's like two motions. I mean, two different proposals.
There are three different.
Oh, more the merrier.
Yeah. Mike?
The reason I suggested this, anybody sees that language and they go, this didn't come from him. And they're right, it didn't. This came because, I'm going to say, I think 2017, we were trying to get some sidewalk supplements filled in on South Kihei Road. So a group from KCA met with Rowena, who was the deputy at the time of Public Works, Rowena Dagandaya, and Naliegan, who's the, I don't know what his title is, but he's one of the top engineers. And we met with them, and the language, this was basically the language they suggested to use. They said you have to be specific, use specific languages, and these were the specifics that they suggested. So that's why we went with that. And then the follow-up was the following year, we walked that stretch of South Kihei Road we walked northbound from the post office to Kalani Hikoi and then back, and we walked it with then Director David Good to look at it and see the situations. And we walked it in the morning, and it was very apparent that at stretches where there was no sidewalk and there was really no shoulder, you're now walking in the roadway, and you have a bicycle trying to navigate, traffic trying to navigate, and walking. So we went back to that original proposal to suggest this specific language with, I guess, engineering standards for specific widths. That was their suggestion to us, because if you don't make it specific, it doesn't have real meaning. So that's where that came from. So that's why we suggested that. Thank you.
And I point out here that I provided the KCA study of where at that time we were talking to David Good about where sidewalks are needed in North Kihei. Kyoki.
I just wanted to ask Karen, where specifically at Azeka Plaza? Because, like there's crosswalks already, yeah? And then that same question is going to be after that for the Kalama Park. Because Azeka Plaza, you have two streetlights that both have crosswalks, yeah. So is there somewhere I'm not thinking? Everywhere
I did
has
not write this. I would say Daniel's language is better.
Okay. And then Kalama too, like where Kalama's big, yeah. So where Kalama Park crosswalk? I know that there's a lot of activity pretty much everywhere, but as of recent years, the surf schools that cross over there increased that intersection by island surf a lot, and they built a raised island, and people were kind of confused, and someone even testified that they drove into it during a flood because it was just like one day it was there and one day it wasn't and one day it was, and then the lines didn't line up. But if you guys notice, they restriped it, so the lines line up now. It looks like somebody just kind of spray painted it, but hey, at least it lines up now, yeah. Right, I don't know. So, where? In Kalamo. So that's just where I'm kind of wondering.
Daniel?
Chair. Yeah, so they've made improvements in the sidewalks between, on South Kihei Road by Kalama, right? They put in those median islands. The purpose of the islands is to increase pedestrian safety. I don't know about car safety, but pedestrian safety, so that they don't, the length of their walk is reduced, you know, in between the open roads and they get to the median island. And then I don't see any, and then Kalama, that's what's confusing to me. Kalama Park, they upgraded that. Zeka Plaza, there are lights with crosswalks. To me, the greatest need seems to be north of Lipoa. That seems to be where it's not gotten a lot of attention, but everything south of, I'm talking about from Long's, right? Long's Drug, McDonald's. Everything south has had a lot of attention, and everything north hasn't had any attention. So to me, in my mind, it seems that's where we do need the crosswalks. Up to a point, because once you get past Kaonaula Road, then you're thinking, well, if you put sidewalks in there, you spend a lot of money putting sidewalks in there. Then you're dealing with sea level rise, and that's what Jordan Molina brought up. How much money do you want to put into? It's either we're going to improve it for another 20 years, or we're going to, get away from that South Kihei Road, that section, So that was the issue I had with what was the draft language in here.
The mayor actually said yesterday too that no more money spending on South Kihei Road. So we still don't have a motion. Sir Mike?
Well, I think we have to consider that how imperative it is to have a sidewalk on South Kihei Road. That, granted, their sidewalks should have been put in 30 years ago, but they weren't. We can't go back. But if they're only going to last for 20 years, so maybe we'll save one life. One child won't get run over. One parent pushing a stroller won't get hit by a car. So how much money is it worth to say that? We spend money, and whatever, last year's budget was $1 billion budget. So it's like, oh, we're going to spend thousands of dollars. Well, maybe it'll save a few lives. So I think we have to make sure where our priorities are and how long that's going to last. I'm self-censored here by the speaker.
It doesn't like what you just said. It's subjective to what you said. Brian?
So I support the concept of this, but I would suggest that we might want to expand it or potentially create a separate action because Wailea Alanui, it has some of the same, we have a sidewalk, but there are crosswalks that lead directly from properties to beaches that there is no crosswalk. And I know we've been trying to get them put in and the county keeps saying no. Then they came out, they measured, and that was a year ago, nothing's happened. But there's major challenges on other roads, so I wouldn't limit it to just saying it's South Kihei. I think we need to evaluate, because I'm assuming that in Malaya that they potentially have some challenges, that we can prioritize saying that maybe South Kihei has a priority, but I don't think we should not include the balance of the South Maui community.
Lehua and then Keoki.
So maybe you can be a little bit broader in terms of identifying or prioritize locations as identified by safety and need. That might summarize everything. And then also, but the emphasis of Mike, as he stated, that you have to be very specific in asking for certain things. So this one would be in support of not identifying just specific places noted here, but to be a little bit broader. So I like to, I guess, make is it a friendly amendment or a motion? A motion to add prioritize locations as identified by safety and need.
So we need a motion first, what we're going to amend, and then we can start amending it. Someone needs to make a motion.
Okay, do you want,
Which one?
Do you want what's up there with the flashing lights, as Daniel said, which I have not written up there?
I think this would encompass all needs such as the crosswalks, flashing lights, that would be added to the locations that are identified by safety and need. So yes, to support it, but maybe we have to look at it to word it a little bit better, to kind of make it a little bit more concise, but then yet broad in terms of the locations. So maybe we better look at it again.
Tova?
Is it the transportation plan that was just updated where all of this stuff, they spent a lot of time? There's so many different plans. I think I maybe mixing names up. What's the one? I mean, I know some of us were in there in some of those meetings. I think, Mike, you might have been there, where they were getting everyone together, and there's a document this thick with exactly, I mean, I can't remember how many projects there are. There's like 60 priority projects, but they're prioritized according to safety and need and what was identified through a consultative process with the community. So I kind of feel like instead of us trying to reinvent things, perhaps we do need to spend a little bit more time pointing back to all the work that's been done.
I think that's the Heli Maui, but go ahead, Mike.
No, there was a Public Works. I remember this guy and I were at there, and Lou, I thought you were there. No, maybe you weren't there. But they had a series of, I think it was like 5 or 6 meetings, but sometimes there were months in between them, and so it got dragged out. And of course, it was, most of us attended most of them, but it was called. Is that what it was? But it was done by Public Works, and they hired a firm, also that the professionals that did it.
So
I too forget what the name of it was, because I'm like, which plan was this? Which plan was that?
So I think we're still missing a motion here.
Yep, you are.
But what is your motion, though? Because we didn't get that. What is your motion?
Okay, so my motion is to accept the original, and we need a second. Then we can discuss and then make a friendly amendment, right?
Okay, second on the original text then.
So on the original text, or the text as amended by Daniel with the roads instead of Azeka?
If it was based on that, then it must have been motioned and seconded if Daniel already had done it, right? So we don't need to do a new one.
No, there are three original texts here.
Yeah, it was never done, so.
No.
Yeah, so that's why, so I'm making a motion to accept the original, right? That's what I'm doing, right? And then Daniel's,
I would motion Daniels,
okay.
and then I'll second that.
Oh, no, we're not supposed to make that kind of agreement here, guys. You're wheeling and dealing here.
So I make a motion to accept Daniel's, right, recommendation. And then should I just read it for the sake of reading it?
Yes.
Daniel's?
Yes.
Right? So install continuous let me put my glasses. Unobstructed sidewalks, bicycle lanes and crosswalks on South Kihi Road, prioritize crosswalk at Walaka and SKR, and improve pedestrian and bicycle protection between Pi'ikea and Ko'onu'ulu roads.
Prioritize lighted crosswalk. There's no crosswalk there.
Okay, prioritize lighted crosswalk. Okay.
And Brian, are you seconding that? Okay. Okay, finally, we have a motion.
Discussion. Are we in discussion?
Go ahead, Keoki.
So my burning question, and anybody can help answer this. Mike, because he's been involved, anybody, and even planning. So lighted, when I used to work McKenna, I took the highway. Now I work Kihei, I take the low road every day. And I'm always wondering, like, how come there aren't any more lighted ones? And like North Kihei, there's none. And then where they are, they're like intermittent except by the Kamaolis. So you're right. So is it just cost? Has there been a prioritative process? Has there been pushback from any of the sign pollution people? No, because there's limitations on signs, and I used to work at a restaurant once upon a time that the sign people were grumbling we were putting too many signs for breakfast specials. And we're like, we got a lot of good food deals. Anybody?
Mike?
I know when we proposed some of those RRFBs in North Kihei, the response we generally got from Public Works was it was not the expense because they were considered very inexpensive, but they objected to having too many. And that was, we would say, well, you have too many in South Kihei. There you have a whole bunch of them in succession, where in North Kihei we have none. So they said, well, there's too many. Well, that's because you haven't spaced them out. And there were a couple of ones that we really pressed for at Ohukai. And one of the answers we got, well, that's not a crossroad. Well, none of them are crossroads because you're going to the beach. But it seemed to be that there was some favor that they wanted to put them down by the Kamaoli beaches, perhaps because there was more people there. And the other answers we got were they needed to do more studies. But it almost sounded like there was just that prejudice that, well, it's only the residents in North Kihei. We're not worried about them. We're worried about the visitors in South Kihei. That's why there's so many there. So that was my interpretation, which was my prejudice because I live in North Kihei and I'm a resident. But that was what I was interpreting as the reason why, not the expense.
Can we kind of focus a little more on this, try and get this policy?
Sorry, I started that, but thank you, Mike.
Okay. Okay, and then I would urge you guys to consider at least what Mike proposed here based on the planning, on the Department of Public Works recommendations for what it takes to get something actually implemented. Brian and then Jennifer.
So I just have a question on the lighting. Do we have to factor in Bill 21, and does Bill 21, I've read it, but I don't recall anything about the flashing lights, but is that something that if we're making a recommendation, we should cross-check with Bill 21?
You're talking about the outdoor lighting ordinance?
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't really relate to traffic lights. Yeah, the outdoor lighting ordinance, things like traffic lights are, safety lights are exempt from the outdoor lighting ordinance. That's my understanding. Bill, is that correct? Oh, he's gone.
I would just suggest that we might want to cross-check that, because if you just look at South Kihei Road, the number of flashing lights, one would argue that that's far more distracting to a bird than one uplight in a tree. So if we're going to make the recommendation, I think I would just suggest that we make sure we're cross-checked so that we're not going against something that's a policy that's being put in place.
I think it was Jennifer first and then Mike.
I was going to make a friendly amendment to incorporate Mike's language as well, if there's a way we can add that in. Mike, is there an eloquent way to add your precise language?
Don't ask me about eloquence. As I said, I just copied this from what a professional said, and I was just going to confirm what Daniel said. KCA paid pretty good attention to that lighting bill that Kelly King put in. And the traffic, anything to do with traffic was exempted. Anything to do with high school athletics was exempted. There was more exemptions than there were restrictions put in. So if we want to check it, we can check it, but I'm pretty clear that that was exempted. Now, I do think, because that came from Public Works, that they were saying put those strict numbers in there, that it would make it more effective. And that was coming from a Public Works deputy director and an engineer from Public Works. So if they felt it was important, I think it's important. But I'm not the best one to try and, I'm certainly the worst one to try and incorporate that language in there. If somebody more skilled at it can do it, I think it would be effective.
Okay, Noah.
Make a friendly amendment to Daniel's motion. And if I may read it, install continuous unobstructed sidewalks, bicycle lanes, crosswalks, including lighted crosswalks, if applicable, in locations as identified by safety and need.
It's actually your motion, so you can make that amendment. Or if your seconder agrees. For the just a suggestion for Mike's, to include Mike's language, you can just say include continuous unobstructed 4-foot wide sidewalks, and then the second part, the second sentence can just remain a second sentence after the other parts. That we're incorporating that into the new language.
You guys know this section of the road a lot better than I do. Is 4-foot wide sidewalks going to be something that's possible the whole length to create unobstructed sidewalks? Or is this going to be getting into the roadway and it's just going to be like, haha, that's funny, let's not? The second question is, do you actually mean lighted crosswalks, or do you want the rectangular rapid flashing beacons, which are kind of two separate issues? The second one. Okay.
Add in, install continuous unobstructed 4-foot wide sidewalks, if applicable. If we put that in there. And then in terms of including, after crosswalks, including lighted crosswalks, and Karen, can you say that again, or add in those two, including lighted crosswalks, such as those two alternatives? The one you said, what did you call it? Beacon?
So a lighted crosswalk is a crosswalk with lights.
Yes.
And the other one is the flashing thing, the rectangular rapid flashing beacons. Okay. It's got a nice name.
Yeah, so included lighting crosswalk and or that second one. So.
Is that what you meant, Daniel?
Well, when I was speaking of Walmart, I was speaking specifically of the rectangular. Those seem to be the most effective to alert people that there are pedestrians in the crosswalk. Where the wall. That's what I'm.
Mike?
Yeah, I think it's, if you just think of RRFBs, that's what the pros call them, RRFBs, and then it sounds like you know what you're talking about. And I get that, that it's practical to add in, some kind of a disclaimer. But again, I took that language from the professionals, and I hate to put in all at once. Then you're giving loopholes and saying, "Oh, this doesn't work here. This doesn't work here." So I'm kind of betwixt and between with that. Practically, I can hear what you're saying. That, well, if it's not going to be there, you can only put it in places it's practical. And all at once, it's not practical any place because somebody doesn't want to do it. So I'm just have mixed emotions about that. Thank you.
And I totally respect what you're saying. I agree with you. I think I say this just in terms of if you don't put if feasible or applicable, and then they might say, no, we can't do 4 feet, so we're not going to do anything. So that's probably where my defense to support you is. So that's because I respect what you're saying. So I was just throwing it in there, but I hear what you're saying though, Mike. Yeah.
Brian?
I would agree with Lahua that if I would be concerned by not saying if feasible, because otherwise they're just not going to do anything. But I guess the question that I would have for you, Mike, by the way, I completely agree with the 4 feet concept and the, was it 2 feet for, I'm sorry, 6 feet and 4 feet and then the 30 inches. But that's like almost the 13 feet-ish. And I ask this very seriously, but where do you see any place on South Key Road where we can add 13 feet to be able to accomplish that? And I'm not trying to be a smart aleck by any means, because I support it, but it almost sounds comical to put that in, because I think anybody reading it would go, where are you putting it? So again, I ask it in a very serious way, because I want to make sure that people don't read it and then laugh and go, what are you guys thinking about? You're trying to add 13 feet of potential space to do this great concept. But so that's so again, I support it. I have the disconnect on how we're going to actually do that.
Again, I can only tell you where it came from Public Works, Deputy Director, and Nal Yagan, who's an engineer, and they were talking about that specific, because we were looking at that specific part of South Kihei Road between the post office and Kalaniakoi. And yes, you look at that, well, I don't know, maybe they're expecting that you're going to take some private land for the public good. I mean, I didn't question it. I thought it sounded good. If they're the professionals and they're saying this is going to eliminate that problem that we have where there's no sidewalks and you have people walking in the street and it's not safe to bicycle, well, why wouldn't you support what Public Works is saying when it's something that's favorable to the community? I didn't question them and say, well, this is not going to work. I said, well, sure, we'll go with that.
That's fair. I guess I'm just trying to connect the dots. So I guess, Lahua, do you want, or are you suggesting that we add the additional bike path and separation as Mike had suggested as well? Lost that paper somewhere.
Can you say that again?
This concurrently creates 6-foot wide bike paths adjacent to the sidewalks, separated by a 30-inch wide unpaved green strip. Thank you. Again, this is the language proposed by the Public Works.
I mean, I'd hate to say no because I hear what Mike is saying, but can you still put if feasible at the end of that? Sorry, Mike, I know it's like not supporting what you're saying, but I just feel that they're just going to be like, nope, can't do it, so we're not doing nothing.
Mike?
I would just add one further thing. When we did say to them about to put in both, and the answer was, well, it's much more efficient to do it all at once. You don't want to put in one and then the other one later. It's going to cost way more money. Put in the sidewalk and the bike path at the same time. It's the most efficient way to do it. So that's where that came from.
Tova?
Thanks for providing the extra context, Mike. I agree. If DPW says we can do it, we should have it in there. Because when I think about what would work for the uses that are out there, that's what would work. And if that's what we're trying to prioritize, let's try to get it done.
Has there ever been a time where DPW said to do that and then they couldn't do it just based on something that popped up new, maybe some kind of new ordinance or something? So is that a possibility that they might be able to say, no, that's not possible within this time frame that we're, coming up with these actions? So that's probably the reason why I would put if feasible as well. So I support what Tova's saying, I support what Mike's saying, but again, this is just to protect the intent of, what Mike is saying. So I don't know if it's always been, once I say yes, it's going to go, or there's times where it was like, could it be possible?
We haven't gotten one additional inch of sidewalk since in the last 4 years that were promised to us. And the claims that they make are because they don't have an SMA permit. They don't have an SMA permit because they didn't apply for an SMA permit. So I don't think it has anything to do with the bike lane. Absolutely nothing. Mike?
Yeah, I know. I think sometimes to try and answer that question, do they ever propose things? You know, it's the different departments have to agree, and we've asked that for years. That sometimes the term is used as departments are in silos; they don't coordinate with each other, and we have seen things like that with that SMA permit. Well, Public Works says to planning, we have to get that SMA permit from you. Why don't you waive it? And, you know, well, didn't you guys sit down and discuss it before to have agreement? So, yeah, sometimes one department suggests it, another one gives it, throws an implement in there. So you kind of hope that with the new administration, they're forcing these people to work with each other before instead of, no, you have, this is my rule and this is your rule. No, they're all the rules for the public. So I think it's certainly possible to say, yes, did they ever suggest something they couldn't do? I'm sure it has happened because another department throws in the impediment. Thank you.
Daniel?
Just to be fair, in case Mike Molina, Director Molina, is watching this, they did add sidewalks in front of St. Teresa's Church, so that was put in. But we need more sidewalks. And I think, far as the SMA rules, that it's kind of silly. I think this is something that has to be changed at the state legislature. There has to be change in the SMA. I don't know if it's SMA rules or something has to be changed at the state ledge in order to exempt things like sidewalks and things of that nature, so they don't have to. Everett, I'm on the right line there?
Yes, and I think it's under consideration right now as under the proposed, the governor's proposed emergency act.
So I don't think we need to resolve that particular issue, but we should decide whether or not to adopt this motion. Mike?
Just two quick items. When the past mayor promised a 1 mile of sidewalk, that was in North Kihei from the post office. So the part that was put in, which is great to have it in front of St. Teresa's, that wasn't part of the guarantee. So that doesn't count for North Kihei. And yeah, there was a bill in the ledge that didn't pass. That was proposing that you could waive the SMA rule for things, but it didn't pass, and that was what current director Molina said, why he didn't apply for the SMA. He was hoping that that rule would pass at the state ledge and he wouldn't need it, but it didn't pass and he hadn't even begun, so that's why that happened.
So let's focus on trying to resolve this and move on. So it's up to you, Lihua. So it's your motion. Do you accept or do you not accept the suggestion to add the bike paths?
I think that would only fulfill half of this because we still prioritize crosswalks, that component. I had summarized it. So I don't know if, Karen, you want to finish that so we can read it in its entirety? So my friendly amendment was to maybe strike prioritize crosswalk at Azeka Plaza and improve the pedestrian protection at Kalama Park crosswalk, to strike that and insert locations as identified by safety and need. So we wouldn't just be beholden to just those, because there's other areas that are not mentioned that are also priority. Then that would complete my friendly amendment. Wait, no.
Your motion?
My motion.
And who was the second one?
That would complete Brian's.
Lost track. It's Brian? Okay.
Can you repeat the ending of what you said? And
Oh.
is it okay if I put on South Kihei Road at the beginning just because it
Yes.
was sounding really bad? Okay.
Yes. So identify locations as identified by safety and need. Okay, then Brian.
So I'm good with that. I would just propose that we take after 4-foot sidewalk if feasible, and we put the if feasible after where you just put the box. The green strip, comma, where feasible. Thank you.
Okay, so this does have the bike paths in it. So is this your motion?
Did you say you want to take out the if feasible after the 4 foot wide sidewalks? Remove if feasible because
Right.
where feasible is already there.
Yeah. So after the sidewalk, the first, if feasible, take that out.
Yeah, if feasible. Yep. Mike, would that be okay? We took out that first if feasible, even though leaving one.
I didn't want feasible.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So that's it.
Okay. Okay.
No
I think-
need-
Nope, keep that one.
Yeah.
Who's on first?
Okay.
Instead of identify and prioritize, did you have that? And I just didn't type it. Identify and prioritize locations.
Yes. Exactly that. Identify and prioritize. Yeah.
And are we saying that it is South Key, or are we expanding it to more of South Maui?
Yes, because that would be including all.
Because I want to make sure that we're kind of respecting, unless we want a separate motion that addresses the balance. Yeah, or a different action.
Brennan?
So
Yeah.
I would be okay having it as a separate action.
Yeah, we make one separate one for Wailea.
Well, no, but I'm sure.
Because we got the North Creek EA kind of got shafted.
Yeah, because
I mean,
That's
everything before that way from Lipoa going that way. See, I live in the ghetto kind of thingy.
I do too. So.
You know what I mean? So I know the funding go that way a lot. So yeah, we got to add you guys.
I mean, there's not a
Yeah.
lot, but I just want to make sure that if we're looking at a 20-year plan, that
Yeah. I'm just thinking, yeah, we need help on that side first. So.
well, and that's I guess why I'm suggesting maybe is a separate action, so that way it's not distracted, and then we could always make the Wailea section a lower priority, so that way it's not addressed before the other side. So,
How about you put prioritize locations as identified by safety and need with an emphasis or whatever's on North Kihei down. Is that needed to prioritize where we live? If we put that in there with the emphasis on North Kihei?
So I guess I'd ask long range, is it better to have a separate action with a lower priority, or putting the focus in one action?
Okay. Yes. Separate is good. Okay, then I'm Paul.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second? Okay.
Yes.
Any objections? Okay, I've adopted this new language about sidewalks on South Key Road.
It's for the next one.
1.11. She's working on Wailea, I think.
Not just Wailea.
Yes, a different one. This is mostly for you, Brian, so keep an eye on this.
I'm keeping an eye.
I live in South Key, and we're kind of fortunate when it comes to sidewalks. Look good to you, Brian?
Did we vote on? the
Yes,
other
we're
one?
done with 1.11.
Did I miss the vote?
I said there was no vote. Asked if there were any objections. There weren't any objections.
I missed it. Sorry.
Yeah. So this is for this is a new motion. If you want to make the motion, do you want to make this new motion?
I'd be happy to make this motion.
Okay. Do we have a second for this new motion? Second by Jennifer. Discussion. 1.11A or W.
Can I just, I know we're not prioritizing, but so we don't lose track or forget about it, can we put it as a lower priority? I just want to make sure that that's noted to respect the one that has a higher priority.
Low.
Low.
Was it a second by Jennifer? Okay. Discussion? Tova?
I'm going to continue to beat this horse. We already have plans that have this all prioritized, those exact things. Can we move on from planning to plan to implement plans that we have? If people are cool with that, and if someone can help me remember the name of the plan. I can see the cover. Maybe it was the one that you're talking about, Rob.
We're not leaving until we figure out the name of that plan.
Okay.
Nobody's leaving.
Okay, so. Is that,
We got it.
Wow, Vernon, nice one.
You got it.
So, begin implementing priority actions for sidewalks, crossings, and bike paths as prioritized within the sub-corridor,
Key sub-area transportation plan.
that one.
Can you say what you said again?
Prioritize based on the Kihei sub-area transportation plan. Based on the Kihei sub-area transportation plan.
Brian, do you accept that friendly amendment?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Transportation. Okay. So that was Brian's motion and Jennifer seconded? Okay. Discussion? You accept this amendment? Okay. Any objections? Okay, fine, we have adopted this additional motion. So it's time to close. However, I just want to point out that we have some things left to do here, not that many. Pretty sure we can finish them next time. But next time, I also want to get into the reviewing, since this is the last of the policies and actions. I want to get into review of the ones we've already adopted, because we have to go through that too. So I really want you guys to take a look at what we have done so far. And planning is going to send, along with the agenda, we're going to get a list of everything we've done so far in policies and actions, as well as a list of the things that we deferred or referred to the planning department. And think about those over the next few days, especially the weekend maybe. And so we can have a good discussion next Wednesday. Things that you think we missed or should be improved or whatever. And then hopefully we'll finish those next week as well as these remaining actions. Everett?
Just as a, I just wanted to point out, I was keeping times so of the 3.5 hours, we spent 1 hour on the South Kihei Road and 40 minutes on 1.11. The rest of the time we moved along at a pretty good pace, but sometimes we just get bogged down on things. So I think, and we've all taken our turns. I mean, every single one of us has gotten bogged down on some issue. But I think if we just all just kind of respectfully nudge each other when I go off on something, nudge me. Yes, just so we can keep things moving.
Who shot the sheriff? But we did not shoot the deputy. I'm still here, sorry.
Okay. Okay, closing the meeting at 9:03 p.m.